Chapter 794. Gate of Babylon. This was the noble artifact that the hero king, Gilgamesh, used to dominate the entire seat of heroes. It was a sword that could be connected to the treasure vault in the City of Gold, allowing one to freely take out items from within. The reason why this noble artifact existed was because of the legend that Gilgamesh had collected all the treasures of his era. This legend was used as a prototype to create this noble artifact. Thus, in the treasure vault that this noble artifact was connected to, all the prototypes of noble artifacts in the world were also there. This noble artifact's grade was EA++, and it would change according to the grade of the items placed in the treasure vault. That is to say, the grade EA++ here was the grade of the items placed in the treasure vault of the Gate of Babylon. If the treasure vault of the Gate of Babylon did not contain any decent treasures, then it would not be a useful noble artifact. It would just be a simple treasure vault. On the contrary, if the Gate of Babylon contained extremely high-grade items, then it would reach the highest grade of A++, making this noble artifact a weapon that many heroic spirits could only dream of. Gilgamesh used the noble phantasm that was connected to the Gate of Babylon in the form of a shooting weapon in battle. However, this treasure vault did not only contain noble artifacts, but also all sorts of items. Thus, rather than saying that it was a treasure vault that contained all the prototypes of noble artifacts, it would be more accurate to say that it was a collection of all the treasures, technology, and even legends of an era. This noble artifact that gave Noah a headache had now appeared in front of Noah in such a form. No, he could not come to a conclusion just like that. After all, the so-called Gate of Babylon was actually just a treasure trove. The value of the treasures inside was different depending on the level of the items and items inside. If it was like Gilgamesh's treasure vault that contained all the treasures of an era, then its value would undoubtedly be shocking. However, if there was nothing inside, then it would just be a treasure vault. However, Noah's thoughts were immediately crushed by Gaia's words. "Little Noah, if you think there's nothing inside, then you're being too rude to me and Aleya." Gaia narrowed her eyes and looked at Noah. Her tone became unfriendly. "If there's nothing inside, then Aleya and I don't have to specially prepare it. This is the only way we can help you," Aleya said indifferently. "You should know that we can't directly help you, give you power, or help you collect world fragments, right?" Noah nodded, only to be greeted by Aleya's words. "Then do you know why this happened?" "This." Noah frowned. "I really haven't thought about this problem. Then let me ask you, little Noah," Gaia said excitedly. "If a rich person is in need of money, then can a poor person solve this problem by directly giving him money?" "Of course not," Noah answered without hesitation. "Since it's to the extent that even a rich person would feel that they are in need of money, then a poor person can't solve this problem by directly giving him money, right? The logic is the same." Aleya immediately took over the sentence. "In this world, there is a saying that mystery will lose its effect in front of higher mysteries. The meaning of the two is actually the same. Just like how a poor person can't directly help a rich person, the reverse is true, but there is no way to do it," Gaia said. "The reason why the world can't do anything to other worlds is because they are equal. It can't be said that the world doesn't have the ability to do anything to other worlds, but the world doesn't have the right to do anything to other worlds. This caused such a troublesome situation. According to this world's explanation, lower mysteries were ineffective against higher mysteries, while higher mysteries were effective against lower mysteries. This was a kind of qualification. Because they were equal, they didn't have the right to do anything to other worlds." Noah understood the logic. However, Noah understood the logic that the world couldn't do anything to other worlds, but the logic that the world couldn't help Noah, was it the same? Was Noah's existence equal to the existence of the world? Impossible, right? While Noah was self-deprecatingly denying himself, Gaia and Aleya exchanged glances. Gaia suddenly smiled while Aleya's eyes flickered with some ripples. "Hey, little Noah." Gaia suddenly turned around and pointed at the nebula-like vortex in the distance. "Do you know what that is?" Noah looked up and looked at the nebula-like vortex. In fact, Noah already had a guess about the main body of the nebula-like vortex. If our suppressive force is the will of this world, then that will be the world itself. Alea gave an answer that was exactly the same as Noah's guess in his mind. That is the source of everything in this world, the origin vortex. As expected. That was the dream of countless magicians in this world, the final destination that they tried to reach, the origin. You should know that those who reach the origin will be bestowed with magic power by the origin, right? Gaia smiled. Then, little Noah, who has directly reached here many times, why didn't he receive any magic? You can't receive any magic directly bestowed by the origin. Alea said indifferently. Because, the origin of this world is unable to directly help you and increase your strength, even when the world is in turmoil. Therefore, even if you come here, you can't receive any magic. Noah bitterly smiled and looked at the key-shaped sword in front of him. Then, what's with this gift? Little Noah, we really can't directly increase your strength and help you. Gaia slyly smiled. But, since we can't directly increase your strength, then we can indirectly increase your strength. This is the reason why Alea and I prepared this gift. Indirectly? Noah's heart skipped a beat. If directly bestowing you with power is not enough, then we can bestow you with weapons and items with power. Alea directly solved the riddle. When we gave you the scabbard, we took advantage of this loophole. However, we could only give you the Avalon that doesn't increase your strength but can provide protection. Now that the world is in turmoil, this loophole is even bigger, so we can finally bestow you with weapons and items with power. Hearing this, Noah understood how big the gift that Gaia and Alea prepared was. Weapons and items with power. In this world, treasures stood at the pinnacle of this category. This gate of Babylon is different from the hero king's treasure vault, Alea said softly. We modified it so that it doesn't connect to the treasure vault. Instead, it contains a treasure vault, so you can avoid the trouble of being unable to pass through the world barrier in other worlds and connect to the treasure vault. We have also placed everything we can think of that can exist in the form of weapons and items inside. Gaia directly gave an amazing piece of news. If the treasure trove of the mischievous hero king contains all the prototypes of noble artifacts, then little Noah's treasure trove doesn't only contain the prototypes of noble artifacts, it also contains all the noble artifacts derived from the prototypes of these noble artifacts. Other than the noble artifacts that can't exist in the form of weapons or tools, there are basically all the other noble artifacts and treasures. Noah realized that his heart was beating faster. If that was the case, then this gift was very valuable. With this, why would Noah worry about not being able to defeat Gilgamesh? The gift is now in your hands. Gaia and Alea spoke at the same time. Don't forget, the world will always be on your side. Chapter 795. When Noah opened his eyes again, the scene in front of him was no longer the pure white space. Instead, it was the familiar room that he had stayed in for less than a few days. Just like the second before Gaia and Alea pulled him over, Noah was still sitting by the window as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion. However, the item in Noah's hand told Noah that everything that had just happened was real. As if to replace the gorgeous scabbard, a luxurious golden key-like sword quietly laid in Noah's hand, dispelling the surrounding darkness. Tightly holding the handle of the key-like sword, Noah closed his eyes as information quickly flashed through his mind. All of the information was about the Gate of Babylon in Noah's hand. Just like what Gaia and Alea said, although Noah's Gate of Babylon was the same as Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon, it was a higher-level noble artifact after being modified. Of course, the higher level referred to function and not power. The noble artifact named Gate of Babylon did not have any power by itself. It was just a treasure vault. The amount of power it had was completely dependent on the level of the weapons and items in the treasure vault. After being modified by Gaia and Alea, Noah's Gate of Babylon did not become a key that connected to the treasure vault. Instead, it contained a treasure vault within itself. This was to prevent Noah from going to another world and not being able to pass through the barrier of the world and not being able to connect to the treasure vault. Therefore, the items that Gaia and Alea collected were all placed inside the key-like sword and not anywhere else. In addition, the Gate of Babylon had 3 functions. 1. Automatic recovery. 2. Automatic recovery. 3. Automatic recovery. Automatic recovery, as the name suggested, was a function that allowed the items taken out from the treasure vault to be automatically returned to the treasure vault. Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon also had this function. Therefore, he was able to shoot the noble artifact without any restraint. After that, the Gate of Babylon would automatically recover the noble artifact that was shot out. It was very convenient. Automatic recovery, as the name suggested, was the ability to recover items that were damaged in the treasure vault. With this function, even if a noble artifact was damaged in battle, it would be able to recover after a period of time. It was also a very convenient function. Automatic recovery was not only convenient, but it was also very useful. The items in the Gate of Babylon were not only noble artifacts, but there were all kinds of items. Among these items, some were consumable items that could only be used once or a limited number of times. However, with the automatic recovery function, even if the items were consumed, after a period of time, the treasure vault would automatically replenish itself. It was like a factory that could produce items. Even Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon did not have this function. It could be said to be extremely extravagant. At least, Noah did not have to worry about using up any precious items. He could use them without worry. Although these three functions were very good, the most precious items were the treasures in the Gate of Babylon. After sorting out the information about the various items in the Gate of Babylon, Noah was gradually speechless. How should he put it? If becoming rich overnight was considered a nouveau riche, then Noah would probably be the biggest nouveau riche in history. Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon had all the prototypes of noble artifacts and the technology and treasures of an entire era. In Noah's Gate of Babylon, not only did it have all the prototypes of noble artifacts, but it also had all the noble artifacts that were derived from these prototypes. As long as they existed in the form of weapons and tools, Noah could find them in the Gate of Babylon. That is to say, if Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon was all the treasures of an era, then Noah's Gate of Babylon was all the treasures of an era before this era. There was no most extravagant, only more extravagant. Furthermore, Noah even saw that in the Gate of Babylon, there were all kinds of valuable items such as gold and gems that could only be calculated by the unit of mountains. It was almost endless. If this was not considered a nouveau riche, then what was? Is this the first time I've experienced what it feels like to be a rich second generation? Noah realized that his heart was actually floating. In the past, I kept saying that the world was on my side, but I didn't feel it at all. Today, I finally understand the weight of this sentence. The feeling of having a backer is really good. Of course, the Gate of Babylon did not really have everything. In Noah's Gate of Babylon, there were only items that could exist in the form of weapons and tools. That's right, only items. For example, Hercules's 12 trials, God's hand. This noble artifact was not in Noah's treasure vault. This noble artifact was a noble artifact created from Hercules's great achievement of completing 12 impossible tasks. Its original form was Hercules himself. Gaia and Alea could not have stuffed Hercules into the treasure vault, right? Therefore, this type of noble artifact that could not exist in the form of items did not exist in the Gate of Babylon. Even so, Noah's Gate of Babylon was definitely the most luxurious noble artifact. Needless to say, with this treasure vault, even if Noah did not use his authority, his battle strength would still be guaranteed. After all, regardless of power, if a noble artifact like the Gibalg that could kill in one hit was used well, it would be more terrifying than any authority. Even in terms of power, in this treasure vault, there was a noble artifact that was not inferior to a normal authority. With this treasure vault, what was there to be dissatisfied with? At this moment, Noah tightened his grip on the key-shaped sword in his hand. The spatial sword that contained the treasure vault suddenly shook. In a burst of brilliance, it turned into starlight and merged into Noah's body. This was one of the functions of the Gate of Babylon. It could merge into the user's body in the form of a concept armor. Now, Noah could open the treasure vault in his body at any time. Just like Gilgamesh, he could open the door of the treasure vault from the outside and freely take out the items inside. Let's see who has more treasures. Gilgamesh, Noah could not help but look forward to it. At this moment, a voice sounded from outside Noah's room. Noah, are you there? Saber? Noah came back to his senses and looked in the direction of the door. I'm here, come in. After saying this, the door to Noah's room was opened. Saber, who was dressed in a white shirt and a blue dress, walked in through the door. Her gem-like eyes were fixed on Noah. Her doll-like delicate face was filled with seriousness as usual, causing one to be unable to help but feel a sense of solemnity in their hearts. What's wrong? Noah asked curiously. Looking for me at this time, it doesn't seem like something you would do. Because tonight is the last night, right? It was rare for Saber to smile at the beginning. So, I want to talk to you. Do you have time? Chapter 796. Saber's words surprised Noah. Talk. With me? Noah's relationship with Saber was not good enough for her to confide in him in private. The relationship between Noah and Saber was, at best, a common front with some cooperative nature. They couldn't be considered companions, let alone friends. It was only because of their relationship with Tonging that they came together and acted together. Under such circumstances, Noah was quite surprised that Saber would take the initiative to talk to him in private. Of course, although he was surprised, Noah had no reason to refuse. I'm fine with it, but is there no problem on your side? Through Ilya's hands, Saber began to sign a contract with Rin and Osaka and Tosakura during the day. Now, was it completed? Ilya's field's magic attainment is indeed quite amazing. Saber directly said this sentence. I have indeed received Ling's magic power. Hearing this, Noah did not ask any more questions. He directly activated the Master's privilege and checked Saber's ability value. Profession, Saber Master, Tosakura, Summoner, Rin and Osaka, Actual Magic Provider, Real Name, Altoria Pendragon Attribute, Order Good Ability Value, Strength, A Durability, B Agility, A Magical Power, A Luck, A Noble Phantasm, A++. Suddenly, a considerable amount of ability value turned into data and flowed into Noah's mind, allowing Noah to clearly know Saber's current state. Although the current Saber was still not as powerful as the mana provided by Avalon after Noah's mana was replenished, the gap was still very small. In this state, Saber's combat power could be 100% unleashed. Under Noah's gaze, Saber slowly walked into the room and also came to the window, but she did not look at Noah. Instead, she looked at the night sky outside the window. Actually, since knowing that Avalon recognized you as its master, I have been very curious. How did you become the master of Avalon? From Saber's words, it could be seen that Saber was indeed quite concerned about this question. Noah did not answer immediately. Instead, like Saber, he also looked at the night sky outside, as if he recalled the day when he obtained Avalon. Same as you. Same? Saber repeated in a questioning tone. What do you mean? Didn't you get the sacred sword and scabbard from the lake spirit? Noah didn't hide it, nor did he say it directly. Instead, he gave such a profound response. Like you, I also got Avalon from someone else. Such an answer should be more or less perfunctory, right? But just like what Noah said, Saber also got the holy sword and Avalon from the lake spirit. Therefore, Saber knew better than anyone that this answer was actually enough. Is that so? Saber's eyes that were looking at the night sky became gentle. You also received someone else's blessing. It was indeed a blessing. This was because the relic named Avalon had an extreme protective power. If someone gave away such a relic, other than sincerely hoping that the other party would be protected, what other reason could there be? Therefore, Saber, who had also received the blessing of the lake spirit, could understand the weight of this sentence. It was a pity that just like Noah, Saber had also lost the scabbard that represented protection and blessings. The difference was that Noah, who lost the scabbard, coincidentally saved Tonging and found the scabbard again. But Saber, because of the loss of the scabbard, lost the power to protect and fell to a tragic death. Since you found it again, don't lose it again. Saber's tone became quite distant. These words were as strong as if they were etched in her heart. Next time, it may not be so easy to find it again. Hearing this, Noah did not answer. Instead, after a moment of silence, he asked such a question. Hey, Saber, why did you respond to Sakura's call and participate in the Holy Grail War? Saber fell silent as well, and the atmosphere in the room suddenly became heavy. After a long time, Saber said an answer in a determined tone. I hope to obtain the Holy Grail. Saber actually gave the most common reason. Obtain the Holy Grail? Noah was puzzled. In other words, do you have any wishes that you want to achieve through the Holy Grail? Yes, Saber said without any hesitation. I hope that the Holy Grail can start everything again. Saber's words made Noah think about the life of the legendary Night King. Before the Night King named Artoria became a king, she was the child of King Yusef, the king of Britain. Although she was the descendant of the king, Artoria was a girl and was destined to not inherit the throne. However, after the death of King Yusef, the Knights of Britain hoped to choose a new king through the famous sword in the stone. Under such circumstances, Artoria, who had concealed her true gender, pulled out the sword of choosing the king from the rock under the watchful eyes of the public. From then on, she became the Queen of Britain. After inheriting the throne, Artoria made countless contributions. In 10 years, she won 12 major battles in a row, making Britain unprecedentedly powerful. However, during this period, Artoria's sword in the stone was broken because of a duel that violated the chivalry. It completely disappeared in the river of history. It was because of this that Artoria came to the sacred lake and received the sword and the scabbard from the lake spirits. Later, she accidentally lost the scabbard. With the loss of the scabbard as an opportunity, the unprecedentedly powerful Britain began to fall. When Artoria led the army on an expedition, the Knights of Britain took the opportunity to lead the army in rebellion. In the course of this rebellion, Artoria was seriously wounded and fell. This was the battle that led to the fall of Britain, the Battle of the Sword Fence. The legend of the Night King came to an end here. I couldn't stop the fall of the kingdom. I was an incompetent king. It was as if the legend that had ended had been restarted. Saber closed her eyes, and her voice came into Noah's ears. If I get the Holy Grail, I hope that the Holy Grail can fulfill my wish and stop me from pulling out the sword in the stone and becoming the king. I shouldn't be the king. The one who pulled out the sword in the stone should not be me. It should be someone else. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely oppressive atmosphere filled the place. Noah's brows were deeply furrowed. In other words, you want to shirk your responsibility, right? Shirk my responsibility? Saber reacted and frowned as well. She looked at Noah. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? Literally. Noah loosened his frown and sighed. I'm sorry, I don't think I can understand your wish. Saber raised her eyebrows and looked at Noah. Let me hear your reason. Since ancient times, there hasn't been a country that could last forever, right? Noah looked into Saber's eyes. When one reaches the pinnacle of prosperity, one must decline. When one reaches the pinnacle of decline, one must be destroyed. This is the fundamental law of nature. As the king of a kingdom, while bearing the glory of building a kingdom, one must also bear the sin of destroying the kingdom. It is just like how one must bear responsibility in life. When you were alive, you had received enough glory to make the whole world tremble. Undoubtedly, you were proud of being a knight and a king. Yet, you chose glory over sin. Isn't that shirking your responsibility? Noah's short speech was like a bolt from the blue. It shocked Saber so much that her beautiful eyes widened. She stared at Noah in a daze, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. Chapter 797. Shirk the responsibility. Saber's words were enough to express Noah's first impression of her. Saber's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively retorted, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? No, you just feel that you're not a proper king, and you shouldn't be the king of Great Britain, right? Noah said before Saber could. Not only did he expose Saber's thoughts, but he also mercilessly stabbed her with his words. But, like I said before, no country can last forever. Even if you don't become the king and let someone else take over, Great Britain will eventually be destroyed. When that happens, the world will know that it wasn't the Night King who destroyed Great Britain, but another king. Aren't you just blaming your own sins on another innocent person? No. No. Saber's voice was no longer as domineering as before. Instead, she sounded lost and helpless. I just want. Seeing Saber's reaction, Noah felt that his understanding of Artoria, the Night King, had been turned upside down. In the past, Noah thought that Saber was a very noble knight. She was also very decent, reserved, and persistent. Just like Elusha, people could not help but rely on her and trust her. But now, Saber's reaction made Noah feel that he had to get to know this girl again. Yes. She was a girl. Even with the glory and reputation that made the whole world tremble, Artoria, the Night King, was still a naive girl. Knights, who were hailed as kings by the world, had a weak side in the end. Of course, girls had the right to be weak, but that was only when they truly recognized their weakness. Artoria was stubbornly holding on. Because of her weakness, Artoria regretted her decision. Because of her weakness, Artoria wanted to start all over again. There was nothing wrong with what she did. However, the girl named Artoria didn't recognize her own weakness. She blindly believed that the weak part of her heart was the right belief. That was pure irresponsibility and avoidance. Realizing this, Noah didn't feel angry at Saber, nor did he feel any unusual sympathy or pity for Saber. He just sighed and let out a bitter laugh. A person should have a beginning and an end. I believe that although your life is not perfect, at least you have a beginning and an end. However, if you intend to deny all of this, you are not only denying your life, but also yourself. Furthermore, you intend to push your own responsibility onto another completely innocent person. In that case, I feel that what you should consider is not whether you should become a king, but whether you should become a human. Saber's eyes were filled with hesitation, but as if to hide her hesitation, she shifted her sharp gaze to Noah. Are you insulting me? I don't mean to insult you. Noah met Saber's sharp gaze without fear. I'm just stating a fact. Undoubtedly, you don't know anything. Saber's gaze on Noah slowly turned from sharp to resistant. So, you have no right to tell me what to do with my life. Noah couldn't help but feel angry upon hearing this. In other words, you intend to shut out everyone's thoughts and immerse yourself in your own sorrow and wishes, just to satisfy yourself? Satisfy myself? Saber's eyes widened again. You're saying that I'm doing this for my own sake. You decided to become a king without permission, and you shouldered the responsibility of strengthening Great Britain without permission. When you realized that you couldn't accomplish all of this, you regretted it without permission. You even tried to push all the responsibility onto someone else because of your own decision, Noah sneered. Don't tell me you think you're doing this for the good of the people and the country? Writer's master. Saber raised her voice, angered by Noah's words. If you intend to continue insulting me like this, you'll have to face my sword. Saber clenched her fists as if she wanted to prove that she wasn't joking. She glared at Noah, and a little bit of magic surged from her body. I see. You're going to fight me because you can't win an argument? I finally understand how childish a king's willfulness can be. Noah took a deep breath and looked at Saber. Alright, since words can't make you realize how weak you are, then let me personally peel off that layer of armor you used to hide your heart. I'll tell you how naive your thoughts are. The atmosphere that was supposed to be warm suddenly turned hostile due to the change in attitude between the two. Noah and Saber looked at each other. One's eyes were calm, while the other's eyes were filled with uncertainty and resistance. The situation had finally become dramatic. No one would have thought that this would happen. On this night of the final battle, the first to fight would be Noah and Saber. In the courtyard of Enben's house, Noah and Saber stood facing each other. One stood facing the wind, while the other bit her lip and stared ahead. It's not too late to take back your words. Perhaps Saber had calmed down, but her voice was as stern as ever. There was also a hint of regret for the consequences of her impulsive actions. Otherwise, even if we're on the same side, would never ignore your insults. You think it's an insult, don't you? Noah looked up with a cold expression. Then there's nothing more to say. Is that so? Saber closed her eyes for a moment before opening them abruptly. Then come to your senses. As soon as she finished speaking, Saber's body suddenly emitted a strong wave of magical energy. It set off a strong light, and Saber's home clothes instantly turned into armor. In her hand was an invisible sword that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, and she pointed it at Noah. Because of Saber's blatant use of magical energy, there was a commotion in Enben's house. Immediately, with Rin Enben as the leader, a group of 3 girls, including Tosakura and Ilya, all came out of the mansion. Although Ryder didn't show herself, Noah and Saber could both sense that she was in her spiritual state. She stood to the side and was very hostile toward Saber. It seemed like she could attack Saber at any time. Obviously, even if Ryder didn't know what was going on, as long as she was sure that Saber was going to attack Noah, it was enough. If Noah didn't use the contract to order Ryder not to interfere, Ryder would have already attacked Saber. As for the rest of the girls, they didn't understand what was going on. What the hell are you guys doing? Rin and Osaka was shocked. Noah. Saber. Tosakura was at a loss. She didn't know what to do at all. Are they going to kill each other? Brother and Saber? Ilya, on the other hand, was a little excited despite not knowing what was going on. She seemed to think that this was exciting enough. In this regard, before Saber could say anything, Noah spoke first. You guys watch from the side. Don't interfere. Perhaps they heard something wrong from Noah's calm voice, but whether it was Rin Enben, Tosakura, or Ilya, they all shut their mouths. However, Rin Enben's face was still a little anxious, and Tosakura was completely worried. Then, under such circumstances, Noah suddenly laughed. Saber frowned. What are you laughing at? Don't mind it. Noah shrugged. I'm just feeling a little lucky. Lucky? Saber was stunned. That's right. Rejoice. Noah raised one of his hands. Lucky that I was able to get my treasure before this. As soon as he finished speaking. Wang. A golden ripple that was like a ripple of water suddenly rippled out. Chapter 798. As if a ripple suddenly appeared from the space, a golden ripple suddenly flashed above Noah's raised palm, causing the space to tremble slightly. The light on it illuminated a small area of darkness. Then, a gorgeous knight's sword slowly emerged from it. Noah held it in his hand, pulled it out, and pointed it diagonally to the ground. It was a knight's sword that was very similar to Saber's Excalibur. However, compared to Excalibur, this knight's sword in Noah's hand was much more gorgeous and resplendent. Its shape was also much lighter. It didn't look like it was used for battle at all. Instead, it was used as an ornament. It was rather gorgeous. The moment she saw the sword, Saber's expression changed abruptly. That is, not only Saber, but in addition to Tosaka, who was still worried, Rin Enben and Ilya were also surprised. Noble phantasm? Ignoring the shock of the girls, Noah pointed the gorgeous sword in his hand at Saber, and his dark and deep eyes became serious. You should have an impression of this sword, right? The King of Knights. Saber stared at the knight's sword in Noah's hand, and murmured as if she was sleep-talking. Sword in the Stone, in the legend of King Arthur in Celtic mythology, Artoria, who was known as the King of Knights, obtained a total of 2 very famous noble phantasms in her life. The first one was pulled out from the stone and became the King of Great Britain. It symbolized the king's sword, the sword in the stone. The second one was obtained from the hands of the lake elves, and became an extraordinary legend. It was the sword in the lake that everyone knew about. The former was broken after Artoria engaged in a duel that violated the knight's doctrine. The latter accompanied Artoria for her whole life until she finished the journey of her life, and then it was thrown back into the sacred lake. Now, the broken sword in the stone was in Noah's hand. The sword that Noah was holding at this time was the king's sword that Saber broke when she was alive, the sword in the stone. Its real name was Caliban, the golden sword of victory. The sword that Artoria had once lost appeared in front of Saber in this form. That's why I'm rejoicing, Noah said with a faint smile. After all, there is no weapon more suitable than this sword to use at this time. Why? Saber clenched the invisible sword in her hand and took a step back. Her beautiful face was shaken again. Why do you have this sword? Now is not the time to ask this, is it? Noah said faintly. All you need to know is that this sword in the stone is the real deal. That is enough. Oh, right. Noah looked straight at Saber. By the way, let me tell you, compared to fists, I'm better at using a sword. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah's figure was suddenly enveloped by a powerful mana. In an instant, he shot out like an arrow. His speed was so fast that Rin and Osaka, Tomoka Sakura, and Ilya could only see a blurry shadow pass by. In the end, in front of Saber, whose eyes were trembling, he met the attack head-on. Ding! As the blurry shadow passed by, the sharp sword in the stone pierced forward with lightning-like speed, striking the invisible sword that Saber had hurriedly raised, causing sparks to fly in all directions. Saber did not expect Noah to make a move just like that. She had no choice but to hold the invisible sword and anxiously speak. Wait. Are you still hesitating? Noah looked into Saber's gem-like eyes. Swinging your sword in confusion, even the name of the Night King is crying. After saying that, Noah swung the sword in the stone toward Saber, who was standing before him. The powerful wind created by the sword tore through the air, creating a sharp sound of breaking wind. It was so piercing that it hurt the eardrums of those who heard it. Ding 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 ding. As the beautifully shaped sword in the stone was swung, in a very short period of time, it created a continuous stream of sword attacks. Every sword attack accurately struck the invisible sword body that could not be captured by the naked eye. The crisp sound seemed to have condensed into a melody, which was extremely pleasing to the ears. Coupled with the flashing golden light of the sword's shadow, it was extremely beautiful. Ding ding ding. In the face of the flurry of sword strikes, Saber could only continuously retreat. The invisible sword in her hand moved back and forth in front of her in a very small area. She desperately tried to block the incoming sword strikes. It looked like she was in a very sorry state. Noah's sword, on the other hand, was like layers upon layers of giant waves. There was a faint feeling of entanglement. As he swung and danced, the golden sword flashed repeatedly in the air, forming a dazzling sword curtain. He mercilessly attacked Saber. You're hiding such a skill? The expression on Saber's face changed again and again. It showed how seriously her heart was shaken. It was not only because of the exquisite sword skills Noah had displayed. It was also because Saber realized how serious Noah was about this battle. Saber had more or less been a little too impulsive for the situation to develop to such an extent. Noah, on the other hand, was not acting on impulse. He really saw Saber as an enemy and continued to attack without mercy. How could Saber not be shaken? However, no matter how shaken Saber was, the continuous flurry of golden sword strikes did not seem to be stopping. It was still chasing after Saber. Saber was tired of defending herself, and her posture was getting more and more scattered. If this continued, the strongest sword spirit would be defeated by the sword skills of a human. In the end, it was just as Noah had said. There is no room for hesitation or confusion. Saber suddenly raised her head, a fierce look in her eyes. Her body crouched, as if she had rushed out from layers upon layers of giant waves. The invisible sword in her hand flashed, bringing with it a sharp sword light as it slashed toward Noah's neck. In the face of the sword attack, Noah narrowed his eyes and the hand that was holding the sword flicked. Immediately, the sword in the stone spun back, leaving behind a mysterious trajectory to meet the incoming sword beam. Clang! Amidst the intense clanging of the sword, Noah, who had not enhanced himself, was forced to take 2 steps back by Saber's A-class strength. However, Noah did not spend any effort to stabilize his body. Instead, he relaxed his lower body. A dazzling vortex of air appeared under his feet. It exploded, causing Noah's body to become a stream of light. In a flash, he disappeared. Swoosh! Just as Noah's body disappeared, Saber, who was wrapped in a whirlwind of magic, appeared like a ghost. Her invisible sword was like a flash of light. It appeared silently and abruptly landed on the spot where Noah was just a second ago. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. At least, except for Ryder, who was in her spiritual form, Rin Enbin, Tama Tanjing, and Ilya could only see a flash of a figure appear in the field. Then, they saw the invisible sword that suddenly slashed at empty space. Ha! After missing her attack, Saber took advantage of the opportunity to stab the invisible sword into the ground. She shook her arm, and with a flick, she shook a piece of rock and threw it forward. There, Noah's figure appeared. Bang! Without the slightest hesitation, Noah raised the sword in the stone high up in the air the moment he appeared. He hacked down with all his might, shattering the incoming stone into pieces. Faint gray dust and shattered stone fragments rose into the air as they slowly fell to the ground. Chi! However, at this moment, behind the falling dust and stones, a figure cut through the air amidst a fierce air explosion. Amidst the sound of something tearing through the air, the figure appeared in front of Noah in a flash. Clang! A dazzling sword light suddenly flashed. At some point in time, Excalibur had removed its invisible state and revealed its true form. At this moment, it was like a ray of starlight, pointing directly in Noah's direction. Chapter 799. Clang! The cold sword light was like a flash of light. In a flash, it arrived less than 5 centimeters away from Noah's throat. Swish! Almost at the same time, another identical sword light flashed out from below and abruptly went up to meet the attack. Clang! Along with the crisp sound of sword and halberd clashing, the 2 knights' swords, both flowing with a golden radiance, collided fiercely. Sparks flew in all directions as they rubbed against each other, causing ear-piercing grinding sounds to continuously ring out. Caliban, the golden sword of victory. Excalibur. The sword in the stone and the sword in the lake, 2 of the most famous swords of the Night King, were now exchanging blows in such a direct manner. Noah stared at Saber, who was right in front of him, and the corner of his mouth slowly curled up. What? You can still do it when you want to, right? Saber clenched her teeth slightly and stared at Noah with a complicated look in her eyes. However, it was soon replaced by a strong will as she uttered those words. I don't feel any hostility or killing intent from your sword, but I can feel that you are serious. What are you trying to tell me through this sword? To be able to understand this, it proves that this battle was not in vain. Noah's eyes flashed. I want you to remember your initial determination. The initial determination. Saber murmured in a dreamy voice. What do you mean? What do you mean? Don't you get it? Noah's voice drilled into Saber's ears. Then let's increase the difficulty slightly. After saying that, Noah tightened his grip on his sword. Clang! The Excalibur was constantly clashing with the blade of the Excalibur. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light burst forth from the blade of the Excalibur. Wah! Although it was only for a moment, Saber seemed to have recalled something from the dazzling golden light, and her expression changed abruptly. However, that was all Saber could do. After all, it was only an instant, wasn't it? Buzz! In the next moment, Noah tightly grasped the golden sword of victory that was blossoming with resplendent golden light. Along with the surging mana from Noah, the golden sword of victory completely transformed into a ray of light at this moment. The sword in the stone, also known as the sword in the stone, suddenly retracted its radiance. Clang! In the end, the golden sword of victory, Caliban, turned into a dazzling ray of light. Even the space around it was trembling, as if a whirlpool of light had exploded. With a whistling sound, the whirlpool swept across the air and enveloped Saber, whose expression had changed abruptly. The whirlpool of light surged forward like a tidal wave. Then, Noah's voice slowly sounded. Golden sword of victory, Caliban. As if awakening the miracle that had been sleeping in myths, Noah released the true name of the sword in the stone. At this moment, the power of the golden sword of victory, Caliban, finally reappeared in this era. Boom! The vortex of light surged up like a tidal wave and enveloped Saber's location. A thunderous explosion resounded in the space, sending countless pieces of rubble flying out of the dust and into the surroundings. Wah! Rin Enban, Tama Tanjing, and Ilya screamed at the same time and dodged in a somewhat sorry manner. Only then were they able to avoid being hit by the flying rocks. However, this also caused the scene to become chaotic. What the hell are those two doing? Rin and Osaka shouted angrily. Even if it's a prank, there should be a limit, right? Noah. Saber. Tonging shouted towards the direction of the smoke and dust in front of her. Please stop fighting. Ilya was the only one who seemed to have seen the end result. She patted her dress that was stained by the dust and complained. Really, we've gone too far. Under such circumstances, the dust in the front gradually faded away, revealing the scene inside to everyone's eyes. They saw Saber sitting on the ground with her body leaning against the holy sword on the ground, barely supporting her body from falling down. The breastplate, gauntlets, battle skirt, and battle boots on her body were completely shattered. Although there were no obvious injuries on her slender body, she was covered in dust and scorch marks. She was panting heavily, and her face was pale. She looked quite miserable. In front of Saber, who was sitting on the ground, Noah held the sword in his hand. The bright golden light on his body gradually dimmed, and the sword in the stone returned to its normal state. The coat on his body was fluttering, and he didn't look miserable at all. He stood there with his back straight. It was clear who won and who lost. However, that was natural. After all, Noah had released his noble phantasm. Unless Saber also released her noble phantasm to resist, the result was inevitable. Or rather, after releasing her noble phantasm, Saber didn't have any injuries. It was obvious that Noah had shown mercy at the last moment. Understanding this, Saber gritted her teeth, raised her head, and slowly looked at Noah. What Saber saw was a very dazzling scene. It was a person holding a knight's sword that shone with a golden light, looking down at the scene below. Under the contrast of the golden sword, Noah was like the king of the world. Coupled with the posture of looking down from above, it was simply dazzling to the extreme. Saber was completely lost in thought. So dazzling, really dazzling, in this world, there was actually such a dazzling existence? As Saber was intoxicated by that dazzling figure, Noah's voice seemed to have directly entered Saber's heart, ringing in her ears. You think it's dazzling, don't you? Saber was startled awake. Then, Noah said, You're right. However, you have to understand, Night King, this dazzling scene is also seen by those who were once defeated by the King of Great Britain who wielded the sword in the stone. If they were to know that the dazzling existence that they were once intoxicated by was now planning to start all over again, rejecting the scene that made them feel ashamed of their inferiority, how would they feel? Saber's heart was fiercely touched. Wasn't that right? In the eyes of others, the Night King was so dazzling, so intoxicating, so enchanting. However, the Night King himself was dissatisfied with all of this and even wanted to give it up. If so, how would those who were intoxicated by it, how would they feel? How would those who were intoxicated by it see it so clearly and trample on it, how would they feel? If you plan to start all over again, not only would you be denying your own life, but you would also be denying the lives of those who once swore loyalty to you, denying the lives of those who yearned for the king. Noah shook his head. No matter what, I feel that you have no right to do that. Please think back to the time when you initially planned to hide your gender and even dress up as a man to pull out the sword in the stone and become the king. Noah turned around. That way, you will understand how cruel your current regret is to your past self. After saying those words, Noah seemed to feel that it was useless to say anything more. He sighed and left Saber's field of vision, walking into Rin and Osaka's house. Saber held the holy sword in her hand and sat on the ground, paralyzed. She lowered her head and fell into silence. Beside her, Rin and Osaka, Kirin Nakajima, and Ilya looked at each other and fell silent. Although they did not know what happened, they knew what to do at this time. So, what the girls should do was to give Saber some space to think quietly. Chapter 800. In Osaka's house, Noah's window was facing the courtyard outside. After returning to his room, Noah stayed by the window and looked at Saber, who was kneeling on the ground with her holy sword propped up. She lowered her head and fell into complete silence. Noah let out a faint sigh. I hope you can understand, Noah didn't care that Saber challenged him to a duel because of her wrong persistence. After all, even after death, she still wanted to make up for her sins. It was easy to imagine how important that wish was to Saber. In short, Saber's starting point was not wrong. This girl named Artoria just wanted to make up for her sins. Unfortunately, her starting point was right, but her method was wrong. Let everything start over? It sounded like there was nothing wrong with it, but in fact, it was very wrong. Indeed, in a person's life, there would definitely be experiences of regret because of bad things that had happened, and there would be quite a few of them. Therefore, almost everyone hoped that there was a medicine for regret that could be bought to erase the fact that had already happened but could not be changed. They wanted to go back to the time when they made a choice that would make them feel regret and make a choice again. This was only human nature. Who could say that this idea was wrong? However, Saber's wish was slightly more twisted than this. Most people felt regret because they wanted to go back to the time before they regretted doing something and make a choice again. Saber's regret meant that she had rejected her own life. It was as if Saber had done something that she regretted, but she didn't want to go back to the time before she made a choice. Instead, she wanted to go back to the time before she was born and tell her parents not to give birth to her, so that she wouldn't do something that she regretted in the future. It was too much. At this point, it wasn't just regret, it was avoidance. Noah was disgusted by this. Looking at Saber kneeling in the courtyard, Noah raised his head and looked at the dark night. He frowned slightly. However, if this continues, Saber's condition won't be able to participate in tonight's duel. Soon, Noah planned to go to Ludong Temple to deal with Gilgamesh and prevent the opening of the Holy Grail. When the time came, if Saber was still in this condition, she wouldn't be able to participate in the duel. Let's see if you can figure it out yourself. Just as Noah was about to close the window and prepare to set off, the door of the room was gently opened, causing Noah to turn his head and look over. There, Tanjing poked her head in and spoke cautiously. Are you resting? You should say that I'm killing time, right? Noah smiled. Why are you looking for me? Come in first. Sorry to disturb you. Tanjing politely lowered her head and then walked in. Noah's gaze could not help but shift to Tong Ying's completely purple hair. He also noticed that the color of her pupils had turned purple. He immediately scratched his cheek. Don't you feel awkward? Tanjing was startled, and immediately realized the meaning of this sentence from Noah's gaze on her hair. She stroked her hair bun. No, I don't feel anything. I just have a headache about how to explain it to the teachers and students when I go back to school. Is that so? Noah smiled. That's really hard work. No. Tanjing slowly shook her head, with a gentle smile on her face. I'm already satisfied that I can be saved at this level. Tanjing was indeed quite satisfied. This girl didn't have too many extravagant thoughts at all. This girl, who had been shrouded in the shadow of the Tanjing family for more than 10 years, was now satisfied with her living situation from the bottom of her heart. It was because the person who was saved would smile like Tanjing, and Noah, who was saved, would feel a sense of accomplishment, right? At least, Noah felt that his scabbard could protect Tanjing from being violated, which was great. It was just that Tanjing seemed to care more about others than herself. The gentle smile on her face turned into a little worry, and Tanjing secretly glanced at Saber in the courtyard outside the window. After hesitating for a moment, she asked, "Saber. Is she okay?" Hearing this, Noah's smile disappeared little by little, and he also glanced at Saber in the courtyard. After a while, he gave such an answer. "Aside from being a girl, she is also the world-famous Night King." With just one sentence, the worry in Tong Ying's heart was dispelled by quite a bit. Then, Noah said very abruptly, "Compared to Saber, I care more about you." Ah. Tanjing let out a soft cry, and her pretty face suddenly turned crimson. She lowered her head and said shyly, I also," Noah, who didn't hear Tanjing's voice that was softer than a mosquito's, sighed. "There should be no need to worry about Saber, but as for you, don't tell me you want to fight with us." Tanjing was immediately speechless, but she also knew that she misunderstood Noah's meaning and felt a little embarrassed. Noah, who didn't get a reply from Tanjing, turned around and looked at her. "What's wrong?" "No. Nothing." Tanjing's head shook like a rattle drum, and then she smiled a little sadly. "I'm not a magician, and I don't have the means to fight. Even my physical fitness is weaker than most people. Tenosaka-senpai doesn't want me to go with you." "That's what I think too." Noah stared at Tanjing and said word by word. "I don't want you to go, it's too dangerous." "I understand." Tanjing smiled understandingly. "So, I will be here, waiting for everyone to come back." Only then did Noah put down the huge stone in his heart. To be honest, Noah was really worried that Tanjing would insist on going with them. Fortunately, Tanjing was not such a capricious person. But at this time, Tanjing suddenly said to Noah in a tone full of strong emotions, "Please promise that you will come back safely." Noah was stunned, and the next second, he smiled. "I promise." Only then did Tanjing also smile comfortably. The night gradually deepened. Opening the door of Tenosaka-senpai's house, Noah walked out. Noah raised his head and looked ahead. The scene that entered his eyes made him stop in his tracks. He saw Saber, who was re-equipped with heavy armor, standing in the courtyard, staring at Noah. There was no confusion in her eyes, only endless determination. Seeing this, Noah said softly, "Have you thought it through? How can it be that easy?" Saber shook her head with a wry smile, and then suddenly smiled. "It's just that I know that I have to replan the path ahead of me. I think it will take a lot of time to think about it, right? Is that so?" Noah closed his eyes, but the corner of his mouth rose. "Then, why don't you stay here and think about it?" "There's no need for that," Saber said firmly. "If there's confusion, then I'll use my sword to eliminate it. This is what I should do as a knight." As soon as the words left his mouth, another burst of laughter rang out behind Noah. "Although I don't agree with using violence to solve everything, there's really no more reliable words at this time." While saying this, Rin Enosaka-senpai, who was wearing a red shirt and a black skirt, also walked out of Tenosaka-senpai's house. Behind Rin Enosaka-senpai, Tanjing and Ilya also followed. "I won't go." Ilya smiled sweetly like a child who secretly ate some candy. "It's no longer the Holy Grail War, and I'm not the final trophy of this Holy Grail War. Since there's a fake replacing my duty, then there's no need for me to witness the end." "That's good too." Noah nodded, then looked at Tanjing, smiled at her, and turned around. Looking in the direction of Ludong Temple, Noah's eyes flashed. Chapter 801. Whoosh. The whistling mountain wind viciously blew across the rather tall Yuanzhang mountain, adding a sinister atmosphere to the Ludong Temple at the peak of Yuanzhang mountain. It was enough to cause anyone to cowardly back away, not daring to approach. However, on the stone steps of the mountain gate, a group of 3 people braved the whistling mountain wind and climbed up the stone steps without any hesitation, arriving in front of the mountain gate. The last time they came to Yuanzhang Mountain's Ludong Temple was only 2 or 3 days ago. At that time, Noah and his team had fought against 2 servants. After a tough battle, they had finally defeated all the enemies. It was also at that time that Gilgamesh revealed his fangs for the first time, causing the entire Holy Grail War to completely change. This time, Noah and the rest came to Yuanzhang Mountain's Ludong Temple again to lead everything to the end. Before entering Ludong Temple, Noah, Rin and Osaka, and Saber felt a wild beast-like aura. Whoosh! Almost at the same time that the aura appeared, Ryder flashed out of the fog and removed his spiritual form. He entered his physical form and held his chained sword as he guarded Noah's back. The group of 3 became a group of 4. However, their destination was still the same. Looking at the Ludong Temple that seemed to hide a terrifying beast, Noah's expression did not change. Only Rin and Osaka, Saber, and Ryder looked slightly more serious. Is that Gilgamesh's aura? Saber clenched her sacred sword, which had been removed from its invisible state as soon as it appeared, and spoke solemnly. Although it's not very strong, the aura is dangerous. Didn't Noah say that? Gilgamesh isn't that strong. Rin and Osaka's face was tense. However, the other party has tens of thousands of treasured artifacts. Just based on this point alone, it's not something we can fight against. Master, Ryder said directly. Do you need me to take the lead? No need, Ryder, Noah said without turning his head. I'll take care of Gilgamesh. The group of girls all quieted down and silently agreed. Then, under Noah's lead, the group walked into Ludong Temple. What appeared in front of them was a temple. It was a temple that had an ancient style and a bit of a modern style. In front of the temple, there was a vast open space. On such an open space, not far from the temple, a person seemed to have been standing there since the beginning. He was like a shadow that extended out from the night and silently entered the group's eyes. Seeing that person, whether it was Noah or Rin Enben, both of them froze for a moment, then their eyes turned cold. That person was not Gilgamesh. That person had a hunchback and a walking stick in his hand. He wore a kimono and looked like a skeleton with skin. His eye sockets were deeply sunken in and his eyes were shining with a terrifying light. Without waiting for Noah and Rin Enben to speak, Saber tightened her grip on the sacred sword and spoke in a deep voice. Dirty inkstone of the tongue tree, shockingly, it was the sinful inkstone of the stone tongue. Haven't seen you for a few days, Saber. Tong Zhangyan chuckled like a kind old man. How is Sakura? How dare you mention Sakura? Dirty inkstone of Jiantong. Saber suddenly pointed her holy sword at the dirty inkstone of Jiantong. You took advantage of the time when Sword was taking me out to attack my master. I'm sure you've already planned this, right? This is also something that can't be helped, isn't it? Jiantong Ginyan let out a horrifying laugh. That laugh was like that of a crying evil spirit. Even I don't have the confidence to deal with a servant. I can only let Sword take you out. After saying that, Naoki Jiantong glanced at Ryder behind Noah and tightened his grip on his crutch. Unfortunately, there is a second servant secretly protecting Sakura. I don't know anything about it. Don't call her Sakura so intimately. Rin and Osaka couldn't help but take a step forward. His eyes were filled with unprecedented anger. You don't have the qualifications to be Sakura's grandfather. Era, the little girl who only knew how to follow behind Toshimi Inaka back then actually has a day when she's shouting at me. Tatsuki Dirty Inkstone sized up Rin Inaka with an appraising gaze and clicked his tongue in wonder. If I had known that Sakura's body was protected by that mysterious power, I would have asked Toshimi to give you to me. That way, my plan wouldn't have fallen to the point where I could only use Shinji to make up the numbers. Rin and Osaka was about to do something when Noah reached out and stopped her. You are the Dirty Inkstone of Middle Tong, right? Noah looked at the Dirty Inkstone of Middle Tong with emotionless eyes. Although I haven't seen you before, I knew it was you when I felt the disgusting smell of insects on you. I haven't seen you before either, but I recognized you at first glance. Ryder's master. Sword's smile disappeared for the first time. Actually, I've always wanted to ask you, why did you send Ryder to secretly protect Sakura? Your relationship with Sakura shouldn't be so good that you can do that, right? Why? Noah laughed, and the surrounding temperature dropped. A disgusting insect that can mercilessly transform a grandson into a monster will never understand. The moment the words left his mouth, a low and deep sound of breaking air resounded in the surroundings at lightning speed. At the moment when the sound of breaking air sounded, a tall figure appeared like a ghost in the space in front of Tong Ziyen. He pulled a chain in his hand and suddenly threw it out in the midst of a series of jingling sounds of collisions. The sudden attack stunned Tong Ziyen. He didn't have time to react. Immediately, the chain was like a guillotine, ruthlessly twisting toward Sword's neck. Puff! The chain turned into a black shadow and flashed, bringing with it the sound of a rubber ball being pierced. With such a sound, a skull-like head flew into the sky. The person who made the move was Ryder. The head that flew into the sky was the head of Tong Zhangyan, whose neck had been broken by Ryder's chain. However, when the head flew into the sky, it suddenly stopped in midair. Then, Sword's body that didn't fall slowly turned into a pile of insects and floated into the sky, surrounding Sword's head. Seeing this, Rin and Osaka felt a chill run down his spine. What was even more horrifying was yet to come. I won't die so easily. The head of Dirty Inkstone, who was surrounded by the insects, was still smiling creepily as if nothing had happened. Even a famous heroic spirit can't kill me. TCH. Rin and Osaka was speechless. How disgusting. Rin and Osaka's words were approved by a third party. He's indeed a filthy thing that people don't want to see, but there's no one more suitable than him to be a witness in the upcoming hell. Well, let's just make do with it. Hearing this voice, everyone's heart skipped a beat. They raised their heads and looked at the roof of the temple. On the roof of the temple, Gilgamesh was sitting on a throne. He looked down at everyone with a cruel and cold smile on his face. There are quite a lot of people here, and there are many bastards that I've never seen before. Gilgamesh's words didn't anger the crowd. This was because Rin and Osaka and Saber, who hadn't seen Gilgamesh before, felt it from him. He sensed the aura that he had sensed in front of the mountain gate. It wasn't strong, but it was very dangerous. Kid, this is the stage for the final stage of the game. Gilgamesh ignored the rest of the people and looked at Noah as he laughed delightfully. Didn't you want to stop me? Come on, try me. That one sentence ignited the tense atmosphere in the surroundings. Rin and Osaka immediately retreated to the back. Saber silently raised her sacred sword. Ryder stared at Gilgamesh. Only Noah's lips curled into a cold smile. Chapter 802. As heroic spirits, Saber and Ryder instinctively felt the threat from Gilgamesh. The two servants standing on the left and right of Noah and Rin and Osaka tensed up their bodies and raised their weapons. Although Rin and Osaka didn't feel the threat from Gilgamesh, the warning signs in her heart kept ringing. She subconsciously retreated to the back and clenched the gem in her hand, ready to attack from a distance and provide support at any time. When the three girls felt the threat from Gilgamesh, they forgot what Noah said before. They forgot that Noah said that he would deal with Gilgamesh. Hero King, only its head was left, and its head was surrounded by a dense array of insects. It fell silent. Obviously, even though it boasted that even heroic spirits could not kill it, it was still very afraid of Gilgamesh. Or rather, Gilgamesh should know how to kill the dirty inkstone of Jiantong, right? Therefore, this old insect, who had been hiding behind the scenes and using some unsightly means, was willing to watch all of this silently. On the other hand, Gilgamesh did not seem to see the existence of Gilgamesh at all. He stood up and stood on the roof, looking down. There was no one else in his eyes except for Noah. You know what? Kid, ever since I heard of your existence from Keeley, I decided that I must kill you at this time. Oh? Noah raised his eyebrows. Let me hear the reason. There is no reason. Gilgamesh laughed self-deprecatingly. If there is a reason, it must be a whim. You told me that only a kid like you can play with me to the end. Play? Noah sneered. You really think this is a game? Originally, the ritual known as the Holy Grail War was just a game, right? Gilgamesh opened one of his hands, as if he was introducing something, and spoke with fervor and assurance. Preparing the container of Holy Grail in advance, then summoning us from the seat of heroic spirits, deceiving us into fighting each other, then absorbing us into the Holy Grail at the moment of defeat, becoming materials for those dirty magicians to fulfill their ambitions. For us servants, from the beginning, this was a game of deceit, wasn't it? So? Noah said indifferently. So you plan to take revenge on society? Revenge on humans? Huh? What kind of joke are you talking about? Gilgamesh laughed coldly. It doesn't matter if they're deceiving me. Seeking happiness is the foundation of all humans. Although this method is a little despicable, it does make me feel happy. Then, for this level of happiness, it's not impossible for me to forgive those dirty magicians. Of course, the tool used by the human magicians to fulfill their ambitions will be used by me. This is very fair, isn't it? Gilgamesh smiled from the bottom of his heart. The so-called king, in fact, has to be fair in certain areas. Although I'm used to being willful, I'm even more used to being fair. Therefore, giving humans an equal slaughter, isn't this also a form of fairness? As if they were reacting to Gilgamesh's words, Rin Enben, Saber, and Ryder trembled a little. That was because Gilgamesh's words had completely revealed his contradictory side. He had a very human side. But he didn't have a human side. It was as if they were looking at a distorted mirror. This contradictory feeling brought about a complete sense of incongruity. Gilgamesh was such a person. Noah, who more or less understood Gilgamesh, was the calmest one. It seems that there's no point in saying anything to you. The king is speaking, a mere servant has no right to speak. Gilgamesh suddenly smiled. And, now, do you still have time to talk? With these words, Gilgamesh turned sideways, put his hands in his pockets, and pouted his lips in the direction of Ludong Temple. Look at that. Kid. Noah and the others almost reflexively followed Gilgamesh's guidance and looked in that direction. In that direction, there was a lake. On the surface of the lake, a person was twitching while floating on the water. Seeing this person, Rin Enben gritted his teeth and said, Shinji. It was Shinji Mitsuki who was transformed into the Little Holy Grail. At this time, Shinji Mitsuki's body was twitching while releasing a terrifying aura. It was as if there was a demon hiding in Shinji Mitsuki's body, and it was about to come out. In fact, although there were more or less differences, it was more or less the same. After all, it's just a fake that was rushed out to make up the numbers. It can't compare to the real thing. It's just stuffed with the souls of 5 servants, and as the container itself, it can't hold on. Gilgamesh's cheerful voice echoed around. Continue to watch, you'll be surprised. Following Gilgamesh's words, Shinji Mitsuki, who was twitching on the lake, suddenly stopped. However, the aura that emanated from his body became even more evil and strange. Gula dash. Then, Shinji Mitsuki's body suddenly agitated. Peng dash. In this way, Shinji Mitsuki's body suddenly exploded into a pile of sarcomas, and it quickly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it became a large meat mountain. Wadash. This sudden turn of events shocked Rin and Osaka and the girls. Even Noah's brows furrowed deeply as he murmured. So that's how it is, the container is too small, and it's not up to standard. The part of the Holy Grail that was implanted in Shinji Mitsuki's body began to destroy the host and overflowed by itself? Ha 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 ha. Gilgamesh held his head and laughed out loud. What kind of ugly human is this? What an ugly Holy Grail. But it's really suitable to be the gate to hell. In Gilgamesh's laughter, above the constantly agitated and expanding meat mountain, a dark hole suddenly flashed in the air. From that dark hole, everyone present could feel a vicissitude aura that made their bodies instinctively bow down in worship. That is the hole of the Holy Grail? Saber and Ryder couldn't move their eyes away from the hole. The hole of the path to the origin. Rin Enbin also clenched his hands tightly, and his hands were trembling. Noah also felt the vicissitude aura, and almost instantly recognized the origin of the aura. It was exactly the same as the aura Noah had sensed in the vortex of origins. Without a doubt, it was the path to the origin. However, in the vicissitude aura, an extremely evil aura began to spread. Pa! Suddenly, there was a sound of something exploding from the inside of the dark hole. Something even darker than the darkness flowed out. It was mud. Extremely dark, like boiling sewage, black mud flowed out of the holes like magma. With a splash sound, it fell into the lake like flowing water. Noah's words could clearly be felt. In the magma-like black mud, there was an endless stream of malice that made people feel dizzy just by looking at it. Did you see it? Kid. Gilgamesh laughed loudly. That is the most fundamental evil of you humans, the despair that exists only to curse humans, a curse that can fill the entire world, the evil of this world. It's finally done. Sujanan couldn't hide his excitement, and said impatiently. Then, Hero King, I'll go first. Leaving these words behind, Tong Zhangyan commanded the insects that were circling around him to fly towards the Holy Grail with his head in his hands. Wait! Rin Enbin exclaimed, gritted his teeth, and chased after him. Saber looked at Noah. Go. Noah said directly. Protect your master. Saber nodded heavily, jumped, and chased after him. Chapter 803. Oh. Just as Rin and Sokka and Saber chased after the Inkstone, Gilgamesh, who was standing on the roof of Ludong Temple, sneered. Although the one who used the insect is not worth my protection, especially in the hands of a bastard that I don't need to care about, but who allowed you to leave? Gilgamesh slowly raised his hand as he said this. A golden ripple appeared in the space around him. Shio dash. However, before Gilgamesh could make a move, a sharp sound pierced through the air. A sword with an extremely luxurious appearance cut through the sky like a laser, bringing with it a sharp sound of wind as it shot towards Gilgamesh's direction. The extremely luxurious-looking sword's attack was extremely sudden. Therefore, even with Gilgamesh's arrogance, he couldn't help but be stunned. However, in the next instant, a mirror-like shield of light suddenly appeared from the golden ripples in the space around Gilgamesh. With a rise and fall, it landed in front of Gilgamesh. The laser-like sword pierced through the air and landed directly on the light shield. Clang dash. Along with a crisp sound, a laser beam shot out, and the sword that landed on the light shield was deflected. Bang dash. However, the seemingly solid light shield also suddenly exploded, turning into glass-like fragments. The arrogant expression on Gilgamesh's face instantly stiffened. Because Gilgamesh saw it. He saw Noah's actions and the movements around him as he stood on the vast open space below. Although Sokka doesn't need my protection with his ability, especially with Saber by his side. Noah looked up and stared at Gilgamesh, who was standing on the roof. He sarcastically changed the Hero King's words and said it again. But, who allowed you to make a move? As the saying goes, an arrogant guy can't stand people who are more arrogant than him. With Gilgamesh's arrogance and strength, after Noah sarcastically changed his words, he would definitely show obvious murderous intent, right? However, at this moment, Gilgamesh forgot to be angry. Because Gilgamesh's mind had no room to pay attention to anything else. Gilgamesh could only pay attention to one scene. That was the golden ripple in the space around Noah. One was standing on the vast ground. One was standing on the roof high up. However, whether it was Noah or Gilgamesh, there was the same golden ripple in the space around them. That was the entrance that would only appear after the opening of the Gate of Babylon. It was connected to the entrance of the treasure vault filled with treasures. What? Gilgamesh murmured. What is that? Can't you see it? I thought you would be able to recognize it if it was you. Noah sighed. After all, don't you have something that is almost the same? After saying that, Noah raised his hand, as if he was sending a signal to something. He raised his hand and pointed. Beside him, in the golden ripple, a huge spear that was more than 2 meters long immediately stretched out from it. It suddenly shook, and with a terrifying sharp sound, it carried golden light like particles, and with an irresistible force, it shot towards Gilgamesh's direction. Gilgamesh finally reacted, and without thinking too much, he took a step back. Around his body, in the same golden ripple, a huge spear that was almost exactly the same appeared in an instant, turned into a sharp arrow, and shot out, fiercely colliding with the incoming spear. Bang! The collision of the two huge spears caused an explosion-like blaze to erupt in midair. A powerful shockwave swept out, causing the atmosphere to emit a whistling sound. It was just the aftermath, but it was already so terrifying. It was conceivable that if the spears that caused such a collision were to fall to the ground, even a building like Enban's house would instantly turn into a pile of rubble, right? Gilgamesh's face didn't have any of the arrogance he used to have after casually resolving such a blow. His face was already distorted by the dark emotions in his heart. How did you do it? Gilgamesh suppressed his anger and murderous aura, and his voice echoed around. A pair of wine-like red eyes also stared at Noah below, and he roared in a low voice. How did you do it? Even if I tell you the reason, what can you do? Facing Gilgamesh's eyes full of anger and murderous aura, Noah curled his lips and smiled. Even if I know, it's a fact that I have the same thing as you. The same? Gilgamesh laughed, but his laughter was still full of anger. You can have the same thing as me? Do you think you can shake this king just because you got a fake from somewhere? Indeed, if you must compare, then your Gate of Babylon and my Gate of Babylon are definitely not the same thing. Noah said sarcastically. It's just that, to me, your Gate of Babylon is the real fake, hero king. Gilgamesh's eyes slowly widened, and they were completely filled with violent emotions. Driven by such emotions, Gilgamesh's voice calmed down instead. Are you trying to provoke me? Bastard. I'm just telling the truth, hero king. Noah glanced at Gilgamesh. If this level of words can provoke your anger, it means that you only have this much ability. After saying that, Noah gently snapped his fingers. In the space behind Noah, golden ripples suddenly appeared one after another, like cannon muzzles, aiming at Gilgamesh above. There were at least 100 of those golden ripples. From the hundreds of golden ripples, there were sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all kinds of extremely luxurious noble artifacts, like loaded bullets, suddenly appeared, and their tips were pointed at Gilgamesh above the temple. Like jumping flames, in the golden ripples, the genuine noble artifacts trembled and made bursts of buzzing sounds, as if they were excited to see the light again. They directly shot out from the ripples, like beams of light, with the momentum and speed of thunder. In a flash, they swept across the sky and covered Gilgamesh's direction like raindrops. Looking at the rain of noble artifacts that were like beams of light and the storm like noble artifacts that were released by Noah like a king, Gilgamesh, who should have been in Noah's position in the past, felt like his dignity had been severely tarnished. His face was distorted, and he swallowed the fury that surged into his heart into his stomach like saliva, and roared out loud. Don't be too complacent. Bastard. Along with Gilgamesh's roar, in the space behind him, golden ripples also fluctuated and filled the entire space, pulling out the noble artifacts that were simple in appearance like arrows, bringing about a sharp sound as they crazily shot out. In the blink of an eye, the noble artifacts that came from the sky and the earth met in mid-air, like a needle against an awl, and mercilessly blasted together. Bang 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 bang. Undoubtedly, it was the collision of steel and steel weapons. The noble artifacts that came from the sky and the earth were like bombs that would explode upon contact. The moment they collided, it brought about a deep and loud explosion sound that reverberated in the sky. The fire that was ignited because of the collision between the noble artifacts and the noble artifacts spread out in the form of a flame wave, illuminating the entire space that was covered in darkness into a red color. The temperature in the air suddenly soared, causing the atmosphere to be distorted. Noah stared at the fire that separated him from Gilgamesh, like a sea of fire, without blinking. His eyes reflected the red color, and the corner of his mouth curved into a cold arc. Chapter 804. Bang 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 bang. The loud explosions were like fireworks, reverberating in the sky above Ludong Temple, setting off bursts of fire and air waves that swept in all directions. Buzz, 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 buzz. On the vast ground of the Ludong Temple and on the ancient temple, the two spaces that were illuminated by the bright golden light were constantly trembling, setting off waves of golden ripples. In the ripples, there were all kinds of weapons in the form of knives, swords, spears, halberds, and so on. They had been widely spread since the mythological era. The weapons that only existed in legends were like arrows that were knocked on bowstrings or bullets that were shot out like machine guns. They pierced through the air and directly poured into the flames and airwaves. Bang 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 bang. Every time the overwhelming rain of treasures poured into the expanding flames and airwaves, there would be an explosion that shook the space. Once again, it set off a violent fire and impact, making the flames and airwaves that filled the sky even more intense. However, this scene did not last long. The next moment, in the two golden spaces that were separated by the flames and airwaves that filled the sky, an unprecedentedly huge ripple reverberated. It was unknown if they had thought of the same thing, but from the two almost identical huge ripples, an almost identical huge sword that was even taller than a person shot out. Carrying a terrifying impact and a sharp sound, it turned into sword light. One sword descended from the sky, and the other soared into the sky. Whoosh! The impact and the sound of the wind carried by the two huge swords that turned into sword light directly shattered the flames that filled the sky of the Ludong Temple. As if a huge hole had been poked, the flames were scattered, and then the swords collided heavily. Dong! An even more violent shockwave brought with it a dense fiery glow. It was like a stormy sea that crazily swept out in all directions. Through the intense flames, Noah and Gilgamesh, who were standing in front of the golden space ripples, looked at each other. However, their expressions were completely different. One had a calm expression on his face, as if he had expected what the other would do. The other was full of uncontrollable anger, which made the surrounding atmosphere extremely oppressive, reminiscent of a volcano before an eruption. Damn it! Gilgamesh's patience seemed to have reached its limit, so his red eyes were full of violent emotions. How did you do it? This sentence indicated that Gilgamesh had no choice but to admit it. He admitted that the treasures used by Noah were the same as the treasures used by Gilgamesh, who had the name of the ancient hero king and collected all the treasures in the world. Gate of Babylon. It was the treasures of the original source of human wisdom. All the treasures of an era, tools, treasures, techniques, and so on, were collected in a complete treasure house. The most extravagant legend that belonged to Gilgamesh, now there was another one that was exactly the same one. No matter what, Gilgamesh was also a heroic spirit. With Gilgamesh's eyesight, how could he not tell that all the treasures that Noah released from the Gate of Babylon were authentic? It's not a fake, nor is it a replica. But if it's the real thing, I don't feel any fantasy elements, even the form of existence is different. Gilgamesh suppressed the emotions in his heart and stared at the treasures that emerged from the golden ripples behind Noah. That's the real thing. It's really the real thing. Previously, it was said that the treasures of heroic spirits were only used when they were alive, and after they died, it was a miracle that was lost in the modern era. After becoming a heroic spirit, although the heroic spirits still had the treasures that they used when they were alive, those treasures were just like themselves, materialized miracles that were condensed from the imagination and beliefs of humans. They were not the treasures that existed in the world when they were alive. Only a very small number of relics, like Avalon, had survived to this era and remained in the world in the form of a physical existence, becoming one of the few true relics that existed. That was why Gilgamesh felt both anger and disbelief. He was angry because as a king, his treasures were actually taken out by an ordinary person to pull down the legend of the hero king, the most ancient king, from his divine altar. Gilgamesh's treasure house was originally condensed from the legend of collecting all the treasures of the era when he was alive. When Noah took out the exact same thing, it was no longer a legend that belonged to Gilgamesh alone, but a truth that could be possessed by an ordinary person. How could Gilgamesh, who had high self-esteem, not feel angry? And what was unbelievable was the treasures in the treasure house. It was the real thing. It was not condensed from the imagination and beliefs of humans, but a materialized miracle that could only be used by heroic spirits. Instead, it was the same as Avalon, a treasure that truly existed in the world. How did he do it? How did he do it? Gilgamesh only had this question in his mind. Those treasures that should have returned to the legends in various ways, and were lost in this era, why did they appear again? Furthermore, all of them appeared on a human's body. That was simply impossible. That's why I said, if we really want to argue, your treasures are fake, Hero King, Noah said. Indeed, when you were alive, you had a treasure vault that contained all the prototypes of noble artifacts. However, that was lost after you died. What you have now is only something similar to the treasure vault that you had when you were alive, condensed from the imaginations and beliefs of humans. Even if they have the same power, your treasures are still different from the treasure vault that you had when you were alive. No, that's not right. Saying that there is no difference in power is a bit off. Noah seemed to have thought of something and shook his head. There should be no difference in the treasures that are held by your real body in the seat of heroic spirits. The treasures that are held by your heroic spirit clone that exists in this era in the form of a servant can't be compared to your real body's treasures, right? Gilgamesh's face became extremely unpleasant. You bastard, what? You don't want to admit it? Noah sneered. Then, please tell me, Hero King. What's the level of the treasures that you used just now? At this point, Noah shrugged. By the way, the highest level of treasures that I used just now was the giant sword at the end. That was a B-level treasure. The giant sword that you used at the end looked exactly the same, but if I'm not wrong, it should be the highest level of A-level treasures, right? Gilgamesh's face became more and more unpleasant. There was no doubt that Noah had guessed correctly. It was precisely because Noah had guessed correctly that Gilgamesh could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. Didn't I tell you before? Gilgamesh raised his head and shouted angrily. Don't get carried away. Under Gilgamesh's roar, the golden ripples fluctuated again. However, this time, the spatial ripples that were connected to the treasure vault called the Gate of Babylon did not open in the space around Gilgamesh, but in the space around Noah. Buzz! Golden ripples fluctuated from all directions and firmly surrounded Noah in the middle. Noah, who did not expect Gilgamesh to use the Gate of Babylon in such a manner, was also surprised. However, a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. Buzz! Suddenly, golden ripples fluctuated from all directions around Gilgamesh, who was standing on the roof of Ludong Temple, and surrounded Gilgamesh. Wadash! Gilgamesh's face changed. In the next moment, from the ripples that surrounded the two of them, relics emerged one after another and shot towards them from all directions. Bang! A shocking shockwave spread out. Chapter 805. Bang! When such a loud noise resounded through the sky above Ludong Temple, a shocking shockwave spread out. Rumble! The ground where Noah was standing and the temple where Gilgamesh was standing were both blasted apart by the Gate of Babylon's noble artifact. Stone fragments, bricks, and rubble were sent flying in all directions. Thick smoke and dust covered the entire interior of Ludong Temple. From the outside, it looked like a mushroom cloud, and a wave of fire suddenly rose from Ludong Temple. The intense explosion caused the entire Yuanzhang mountain to tremble slightly, causing countless birds in the forest to fly away in panic. It also caused the smell of gunpowder to spread in the air. After an unknown amount of time, the mushroom cloud of smoke and fire slowly dissipated, revealing the scene in Ludong Temple. As expected, the temple had completely turned into a pile of rubble and was still burning. It was simply too horrible to look at. The vast open space also seemed to have been burned by a huge fire. Thick smoke filled the air, the ground was charred black, and even filled with flames. It was a mess. In the middle of such a mess, there was a square box. It was a square box with a shield standing in front, back, left, right, and top of it. It was a square box made of shields. Not long after, the shields that formed the square box turned into light particles and returned to their treasure vault. In the square box formed by the shield that slowly turned into light particles and disappeared, Noah exhaled a breath of air from his mouth. His gaze was focused on the rubble of the temple that was burning in flames. Just now, Noah and Gilgamesh opened their gate of Babylon around each other and released the relics from the gate of Babylon. All the relics that Gilgamesh was using were grade A relics. As for Noah, he had also used an A-grade relic. In the end, Noah used an A-grade shield relic to block Gilgamesh's A-grade relic. As Gilgamesh was only a servant and not a heroic spirit, even if his relic was A-grade, it could not break through Noah's relic. After all, Noah's relic was authentic. If Gilgamesh's real body came, it might be able to break through the shield and affect Noah. However, since Gilgamesh was only a servant's clone, those relics were not enough to break through Noah's relic. It was different if it was the other way around. If Gilgamesh used the same method as Noah to block Noah's relic, he would definitely die a horrible death. Since Gilgamesh was just a clone of a servant, even if it was a grade A defensive relic, it would only be equivalent to a grade B relic. On the other hand, the weapon that Noah used to attack was a genuine grade A relic. Using a B-grade relic to defend against an A-grade relic? It was obvious what the consequences would be. Unless Gilgamesh was using an X-grade relic or a relic with a A+ feature that could double the power in an instant. Needless to say, Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon definitely had a relic of this level. Therefore, although Noah was quite confident in his previous attack, he could feel that Gilgamesh would not be defeated just like that. Poof! As expected, in the ruins of the temple that was filled with burning debris, a strange sound was suddenly heard. Hearing the sound, Noah narrowed his eyes even though he had expected it. It's not that easy, huh? Under such circumstances, Noah saw it. In the middle of the burning temple ruins, there was an empty space. In the empty space, there was a huge shield. It was a huge shield that looked like a city gate, with golden flower petals embedded in the middle of the shield. Looking at the shield, Noah's eyes narrowed. In Noah's Gate of Babylon, there were all kinds of relic that could exist in the form of weapons and tools. This included the prototype of the relic. Therefore, the shield was also in Noah's Gate of Babylon. After obtaining the Gate of Babylon, Noah directly obtained the information of all the items in the Gate of Babylon. Therefore, Noah recognized the shield that was also in his treasure vault at first glance. Blazing 7 rings, Law of Ajax. Blazing 7 rings, Law of Ajax. Once, Archer had also projected this relic. In Greek mythology, it was named after the famous hero of the Trojan War, Ajax. It was proud of its absolute defense against thrown weapons and was regarded as an invincible relic against thrown weapons. However, it was different from the Blazing 7 Rings, Law of Ajax, that Archer projected. The shield in front of him was as thick as a city wall. It was the prototype of the Blazing 7 Rings, Law of Ajax. Shah. The thick and huge shield slowly turned into light particles and dissipated in the air. Behind the thick and huge shield, Gilgamesh lowered his head. His expression could not be seen clearly, but his body was surging with a violent aura. You actually made me take out the shield of God. Gilgamesh raised his head and looked at Noah's vision with a pair of eyes full of anger. You really angered me, boy. After saying that, Gilgamesh raised one hand high above his head. Wang. In the tremor of the space, the golden space ripples once again fluctuated from Gilgamesh's hand. However, this time, there was no relic in the golden space ripples. Instead, a burst of bright light burst out and turned into a sword. A key-shaped sword. That was the original body of the Gate of Babylon. Clang. On the key-shaped sword that was held high by Gilgamesh, a burst of red light suddenly skyrocketed. The red light turned into lines like electric wires and spread to the sky, covering the entire space above Gilgamesh. Seeing this scene, Noah's face finally became dignified little by little. Are you finally going to take out your last trump card? Only Noah could understand what the scene in front of him meant. It was analyzing the phenomenon of this world. In Gilgamesh's treasure vault, there was a relic that could only be used after analyzing the world. It was the highest level, almost unparalleled relic. After analyzing the electric wires of this world and completing its task, it retracted back to Gilgamesh's hand. In Gilgamesh's hand, the key-shaped sword had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by another sword. The sword body was cylindrical. The cylindrical sword body was black and covered with red lines. The sword hilt was golden, and the sword guard was golden as well. However, it looked like 3 pieces of silkworm-like flakes that overlapped each other and spread out on the left side. It was a strange sword covered with strange patterns. That was Gilgamesh's most powerful relic. It's time to wake up. Gwili sword, Ea. Holding the cylindrical sword in his hand, Gilgamesh roared out loud. Cut the enemy and this world together. The black cylindrical sword body that was covered with red lines suddenly rubbed against each other in 3 different directions and quickly rotated. Wang! The cylindrical sword body, which was composed of 3 cylindrical blades, rotated faster and faster. It was so fast that the sharp sound of metal rubbing against each other resounded throughout the entire space. Immediately, waves of red air current rose from the sword and surged out through the gaps between the 3 cylindrical rotating blades. Moreover, it continued to surge. Enuma Elish, creator of heaven and earth. The red air suddenly turned into the most violent wind pressure. In an instant, it filled the entire space. Chapter 806. Enuma Elish, the Star of Creation. Gilgamesh's roar, which was even more violent than the storm, rushed into the sky and lingered in the sky above the Ludong temple. However, not long after the sound lingered, the wind pressure that could suppress the roar of Gilgamesh, which could suppress the storm, filled the entire sky. Gilgamesh fiercely pierced the pillar-shaped relic named Obedient Parting Sword, Ea, forward. Immediately, the entire space trembled and collapsed. Yes. Collapse. From the gaps between the 3 cylindrical blades of the Obedient Separation Sword, Ea, a red stream of air surged up and instantly transformed into a red tornado. Like a terrifying red dagger, it became the most terrifying wind pressure and directly cut the entire space apart. Suddenly, wherever the red wind pressure passed, the space seemed to directly burst open. It was as if it was fiercely torn apart by an invisible bloody mouth, and jagged pitch-black spatial rifts appeared. Then, the terrifying red wind pressure swept over like a raging wave that covered the sky and earth, engulfing Noah's body. Between heaven and earth, there was suddenly silence. In the next second, an indescribable terrifying shock wave exploded inside the Ludong temple. It carried with it some red airflow and swept in all directions. Pung! Wherever the red airflow passed, the originally scorched ground suddenly burst open, and countless gravel and smoke were lifted. Kacha kacha! The surrounding walls of the Ludong temple were swept by the shock wave. Even though they were some distance away from the center of the shock wave, they still cracked, and cracks appeared as if they were riddled with holes. The ruins of the Ludong temple, which was closest to the Obedient Separation Sword, Ea, evaporated in an instant, and turned into a piece of red land. The burning debris was swept into the terrifying wind pressure and was annihilated into nothingness. In the end, there was only a spatial rift that extended from Gilgamesh's direction to Noah's direction. It was accompanied by the terrifying red wind pressure, and it swept out together with the spatial rift in the Ludong temple. It was just like Gilgamesh's declaration when he released the strongest relic that belonged to him. The world was cut open. Obedient Separation Sword, Ea. That was the true name of the sword. And Obedient Separation Star, Enuma Elish, was not so much the true name of the relic, but rather, it was the maximum output state of the relic called Obedient Separation Sword, Ea. Only when the Obedient Separation Sword, Ea, was activated to its maximum output state could the relic be called Obedient Separation Sword, Ea, truly was able to cut the world. This relic was the world's oldest sword. Before the concept of sword appeared in this world, it already existed in this world. Therefore, it was the King of Swords that was even older than the sword itself. Even the Excalibur, which had the reputation of being the strongest holy sword in the world, was no match for it. Therefore, the relic called Obedient Separation Sword, EA, was a true X grade. Its power was even greater than that of the Excalibur, which could instantly double the power of the Excalibur, which also broke the rules and reached the A++ grade. As for its ability, it was just as the name said. Heaven and earth creation. This was a precious artifact that could cut apart the world itself. Whoosh! The red airflow that turned into wind pressure continued to spread throughout the Ludong Temple, and it scattered everywhere. It crushed the ground. It destroyed the walls. It dug out the soil. It crushed the atmosphere. When it showed signs of weakening, the entire Ludong Temple was already in a sorry state. Ha! 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 Holding the Obedient Separation Sword, EA, that slowly stopped spinning, Gilgamesh panted heavily. The anger in his eyes began to dissipate, and it was replaced by the urge to vomit. I didn't think that against a human living in this weak era, I would even take out the Obedient Separation Sword, EA, and I even used it at its maximum output state. This is a relic that can only be used against the tyrant. After taking a deep breath, Gilgamesh calmed his breathing, glanced at the disappearing space fault, and snorted coldly. To be able to see my Obedient Separation Sword, EA, even if you die, you should feel proud, kid. After leaving this sentence, Gilgamesh planned to turn around and leave. As for whether Noah could survive this attack, Gilgamesh did not doubt it at all. That was his confidence in his strongest trump card. Under the maximum output state, even if Noah had the exact same treasure vault as Gilgamesh, there would not be any relic that could defend against the full power of the Obedient Separation Sword, EA. Even if all of the relic were real, it would still be the same. At least, Gilgamesh, who also had the prototype of all the relic, could be sure that in his own treasure vault, there was absolutely no relic that could defend against the Obedient Separation Sword, EA, at its maximum output. That was why Gilgamesh was so confident. However, Gilgamesh did not know at all. Other than the prototype of all the relic, Noah also had a relic that was not the prototype. Just as Gilgamesh was about to turn around and leave, in the space around him, golden ripples suddenly appeared. Wadash! Gilgamesh's expression changed greatly. In the next moment, from the golden ripples, chains suddenly shot out. In a situation where Gilgamesh was unprepared, they wrapped around his limbs, body, and even his neck. Immediately after, the chain tightened. Pa! As if intending to tear Gilgamesh's entire body into pieces, the chains suddenly tightened with a crisp sound, pulling Gilgamesh into the air. Goo! Gilgamesh groaned as his entire body was pulled into the air. His limbs were forcefully pulled in all directions, and he was hung in the air with his arms and legs spread out. Suddenly, the pain from his bound body and the forceful pulling of his limbs swept through Gilgamesh's nerves. The force was so strong that even as a heroic spirit, Gilgamesh could not help but groan. However, Gilgamesh did not care about the pain. In the mind of the hero king, what could be stored was not pain, but blankness. In Gilgamesh's vision, at the end of the gradually disappearing spatial fault in front of him, a protective barrier that was flashing with bright light as if it was composed of pieces of crystals was gradually exposed to the air. A sword that can cut the world? Such a voice came from the dazzling protective barrier. It is said that before the world appeared, the world was just a hell. Until the creation of the world, a world that could allow people to live was born. Along with this voice, inside the protective barrier, a figure was also imprinted into Gilgamesh's eyes. And there is one thing that already existed in the hell period before the creation of the world, thus witnessing the world that used to be hell before the creation of the world. It is an object that recognizes the planet that used to be hell before the creation of the world. It is simply the oldest precious artifact since ancient times. The resplendent protective barrier moved. Following the figure that took a step forward, it moved. No. It should be said that the protective barrier was originally attached to the figure, and moved under the movement of the figure. And its effect is to materialize this legend. Rather than saying that it cuts the world, it is better to say that it creates the hell that existed before the creation of the world. Therefore, the first time it is used in this world, it needs to analyze the world itself, so that the hell that existed in this world can be created. It does have an effect similar to the creation of the world. With such a sentence, the protective barrier around the figure dissipated little by little, exposing Noah who was inside. Just in time, he arrived in front of Gilgamesh. Looking at Gilgamesh's pupils that had shrunk to the size of a needle tip, Noah sneered. But to say that you want to cut the world, don't you think it is too arrogant? Chapter 807. In this world, there was a saying of, can do it. Cutting open the world. Indeed, with the ability of the good separation sword, it was not impossible to say that it could cut open the world. After all, no matter what, the ability of the good separation sword, was used to cut open space. Through condensing and compressing the wind pressure to create a fault, it would form a simulated fault in space and time to attack, shattering all hostile objects. This ability, just like the legend of the good separation sword, was used to split open the sky and earth, creating hell. However, the good separation sword, at most, could only cut open the world. Let's use rice as an example. A grain of rice is considered rice, a big bowl is also considered rice, but if you swallow a grain of rice, can it be considered rice? Under Gilgamesh's gaze of disbelief, Noah, who was standing in front of Gilgamesh, repeatedly mocked him. You only cut open the entire world, which is not even a hair from 9 oxen, and you dare to call it cutting open the world. What a joke. Hearing Noah's extremely sarcastic words, Gilgamesh finally reacted and fiercely struggled. However, the more Gilgamesh struggled, the tighter the chains wrapped around his body. No matter how Gilgamesh struggled, he was unable to move. Don't waste your energy, Hero King. Noah lightly said. Don't tell me you still don't recognize what these chains are? After Noah said this, Gilgamesh finally noticed the chains binding his body. But because he noticed it, Gilgamesh's face suddenly froze. Don't tell me, for you, this should be a very familiar relic, right? Noah said with a smile that did not look like a smile. Its name is Heavenly Lock, Irukudu. The higher the divinity of the target, the stronger the relic. Even if you don't recognize your own good separation sword, you should be able to recognize this relic. Gilgamesh suddenly became furious like never before. You bastard. If people who knew Gilgamesh saw his furious appearance, they would be shocked. This was because even the Hero King, who was extremely easily angered, probably did not reach this level of rage in his entire life, right? However, if one really understood the Hero King, Gilgamesh, they would definitely understand why he was so furious. In his entire life, Gilgamesh, who was proud of being a king, only had one unique companion who could be called a close friend. That person's name was Enkidu. In the past, in the land ruled by Gilgamesh, there was a divine beast called the Heavenly Bull that wreaked havoc on the land, causing the land to fall into a famine that lasted for 7 years. In order to resolve this disaster, Gilgamesh and his only close friend, Enkidu, worked together to defeat the Sky Bull and restore peace to the land. At that time, he had relied on this chain to capture the Heavenly Bull and lead the battle to victory. Thanks to this chain, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were able to capture the Celestial Bull and defeat it, thus leading to the final victory and resolving this crisis. So, in memory of his friend, and in memory of this great cause, Gilgamesh named the chain after Irukudu, the Lock of Heaven, Irukudu. To Gilgamesh, the Irukudu was not only a rare godly weapon, but it was also a link between him and his only close friend. Therefore, Gilgamesh trusted the Irukudu more than the obedient parting sword, Now, this precious artifact that he trusted the most and was connected to his only close friend in his life was used by the enemy just like that. Furthermore, it was used against him. How could Gilgamesh not be furious? What made Gilgamesh even more furious was the fact that the Urukadu relic that he was using on himself was most likely the real deal. This meant that the Urukadu parting sword that was wrapped around his body was most likely the same chain that he had used with his only close friend in his life. This fact caused Gilgamesh's fury to turn into ruthlessness. See if I don't crush this shameless thief into pieces. Gilgamesh allowed the ruthlessness in his heart to continue as he gripped the obedient parting sword in his hand tightly. The godly sword that could cut open the world and create hell once again began to spin, overflowing with a red stream of air. However, in the next second, the spinning, discordant sword, suddenly stopped as if it was stuck on something. What? Gilgamesh was stunned. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows. Looks like it has reached its limit. Limit? Gilgamesh had an ominous feeling in his heart. What did you do? Noah did not answer. Instead, he silently extended his hand and removed a piece of jewelry from his waist, presenting it in front of Gilgamesh's eyes. It was a bell. It was a black, square-shaped bell tied to a pendant. On the pitch-black square-shaped bell, a faint gas that was hard to detect with the naked eye was diffusing out. Gilgamesh, who was touched by the gas, only felt that something in his body was constantly being drained away. Magic? Gilgamesh suddenly woke up. My magic is being drained away? Don't you think it's too late for you to realize it now? Noah smirked. That's right. It's just a small item that causes the loss of mana. It's not a noble phantasm, just a one-time consumable item. The gas inside is limited, but it won't be affected by any external factors. Once it's released, it will expel all mana units within a certain range bit by bit. It also has the additional effect of preventing anyone who absorbs the gas from noticing the loss of mana. As long as they don't have skills like sabers, or if they come into direct contact with it, they won't notice the loss of mana. Hearing this, how could Gilgamesh not understand why he could not use a noble artifact? It was because, with Gilgamesh's current magic, it was not enough to use a noble artifact. Under the situation where he did not notice that his magic was being drained away, he was driven by anger and released his strongest noble artifact. That attack just now had almost depleted all the magic in Gilgamesh's body. He could not use a noble artifact at all. Now, let's not talk about the good parting sword, you don't even have enough magic to open the treasure vault, right? Noah said indifferently. This time, you've lost, Gilgamesh. Stop spouting nonsense. Gilgamesh roared angrily. I don't have that kind of tool in my treasure vault. You don't have it, but that doesn't mean I don't, Noah said sarcastically. Just like the noble artifact that blocked your good parting sword, that noble artifact, you don't have it in your treasure vault, right? Gilgamesh's expression changed. That's Avalon, the noble artifact that I first owned. Noah looked straight at Gilgamesh. Unlike you, my treasure vault has all the noble artifacts of all the heroes that have existed in the past, including yours and the noble artifacts of the other heroes. Why? Gilgamesh's face was distorted. Why do you have such a treasure vault? Hearing this, Noah suddenly smiled. It's just that my family was worried that I would meet with some trouble outside, so they took all the noble artifacts that were supposed to be lost and returned to the legends from various eras before they disappeared, and gave them to me as a gift. After saying this, Noah raised one of his hands, and a golden ripple suddenly fluctuated out, and a sharp knight's sword popped out and fell into his hand. You can be considered to have died in vain. Following this sentence, the sharp knight's sword cut through the air and pierced forward. Poochie. Blood splattered into the air. Chapter 808. Poochie. Accompanied by a ripping sound, the knight's sword mercilessly pierced through Gilgamesh's heart and came out from his back. Crimson blood splattered onto the ground. Ugh! Gilgamesh's eyes widened. His entire body stiffened on the chains that wrapped around his limbs and torso. He could not even move an inch. Fresh blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Following gravity, it dripped onto the ground together with the fresh blood from his pierced heart. Not long after, it accumulated into a pool of blood. As his body gradually lost its strength and vitality, the discordant sword, in Gilgamesh's hands slowly slid down. With a crisp "pa" sound, it smashed onto the ground, turning into particles of light and dissipating into the air. Without a doubt, this was a fatal wound. Under normal circumstances, due to the fact that a servant was a spirit, even if his heart was pierced, he could still be healed. It was not a fatal wound. Gilgamesh obtained a body during the previous Holy Grail War. Thus, he could maintain his current state in this world without consuming any magic. However, because he obtained a body, if his heart was pierced, it was undoubtedly a fatal wound. Thus, Gilgamesh's vision began to blur. Was it painful? Of course it was painful. Was he unwilling? Of course he was unwilling. However, compared to the pain and unwillingness, Gilgamesh was more concerned about another problem. At that moment, Gilgamesh, who was bound by the chains and hung in mid-air, lowered his head and squeezed out these words with difficulty. "You, who are you?" It was a legitimate question. After all, how could an ordinary person possibly have a way to retrieve the treasures that were about to be lost in every era at the moment of their disappearance, collect them, and put them into a treasure vault? With such an existence behind him, and the identity of Noah who obtained this treasury from him, how could he be an ordinary person? Thus, this was a legitimate question. Towards this legitimate question, Noah only replied with such a calm answer. "Noah Doria. That's my name. Noah. Dole." Gilgamesh couldn't help but repeat the name again. As if he didn't see Gilgamesh's reaction, Noah pulled out the knight's sword from Gilgamesh's heart. With a swing, the blood on the sword was flung to the ground. Gilgamesh just stared at Noah, his whole body trembling. It was as if he had used up all his strength in this one moment and roared out loud. "Noah Doria." The roar turned into an echo, reverberating in the sky above Ludong Temple. In the next second, Gilgamesh's body slowly turned into a cloud of mist and disappeared into the air. Gilgamesh, leave the stage. In the end, the battle between Noah and the ancient king, who stood at the peak of all heroic spirits, ended with Noah's victory. It was believed that this would be an unbelievable result, but it would also be a result that people would take for granted. Of course, it was unbelievable that such an existence would be defeated by a human. It was natural that after Noah received the Gate of Babylon from Gaia and Aleia, the result was destined to be like this. Facing the hero king who had thousands of prototyped noble artifacts, he used a noble artifact that was one level above it to suppress it. Wasn't the result obvious? At least, that was what Ryder thought as he witnessed the battle between the relic and the relic. Of course, when Gilgamesh took out the good parting sword, Ryder thought that it was impossible. Although Noah made it seem like it was worthless, the good separation sword was definitely at the top of all noble artifacts. It was not an exaggeration to call it the king of all noble artifacts. As previously mentioned, noble artifacts could be divided into two types: human noble artifacts and military noble artifacts. However, you are referring to the classification of the most common treasures. In terms of power, a military noble artifact was undoubtedly above a human noble artifact. However, above a military noble artifact, there was a noble artifact that was far more powerful than a human noble artifact. A city noble artifact. As the name suggested, it was a powerful noble artifact that could even send a solid structure like a city flying. The difference between a human noble artifact and a military noble artifact was only the difference in effect and range. However, once it reached the level of a city noble artifact, the difference in power would be huge. If a human noble artifact was a single shotgun and a military noble artifact was a missile, then a city noble artifact would be at the level of an atomic bomb. To describe it in one sentence, a city noble artifact, a human noble artifact, and a military noble artifact were on a completely different level. The power of Gilgamesh's good separation sword was even more powerful than a city noble artifact. It had the ability to cut through space a world-opposing noble artifact. As a heroic spirit himself, Ryder clearly knew how terrifying the obedient parting sword, was. It was a pity that this relic was still unable to break through Avalon's defense. Therefore, victory belonged to Noah. At this moment, Ryder could not help but think. Noah had said that he had all of Gilgamesh's noble artifacts in his treasure vault. Even Gilgamesh did not have one, but he had one. In that case, did that mean that Noah also had that terrifying world-defying relic? What's more, it's an authentic one that's even more powerful than the one Gilgamesh had just used. At this point, even Ryder didn't dare to continue thinking about it. At this moment, Noah's voice was heard. "Let's go, Ryder." Noah did not even look in the direction that Gilgamesh had disappeared in. He walked in another direction without any hesitation. To solve the final problem. Ryder nodded silently and followed behind Noah. At the last moment, Ryder had this thought in his mind. I don't seem to know my master that well. If he still had the chance to stay in this world after destroying the Holy Grail, he really wanted to understand this unfathomable master and stay by his side. On the other hand, while Noah and Gilgamesh were fighting, Rin and Osaka and Saber were running through the forest towards the lake. The lake was in Ludong Temple. Therefore, even though it was a little far from the mountain gate, since it was in Ludong Temple, it should not be too far away. With the use of magic to increase their speed, Rin and Osaka and Saber only took a few minutes to reach the lake. The view in front of them suddenly opened up. It was no longer the same forest, but a lake. However, the moment they saw the lake, Rin and Osaka and Saber froze as if they were petrified. Looking at the scene in front of them, both Rin and Osaka and Saber were speechless. In the end, Rin and Osaka expressed his emotions with such a sentence. "What's that?" In the middle of the lake, a huge piece of meat was wriggling in disgust as it continued to increase in size. Above the huge piece of meat, in mid-air, there was a dark hole. In the dark hole, mud that was darker than anything else in the world gushed out like magma and fell into the lake like a waterfall, dyeing the entire lake pitch black. Rin and Osaka and Saber felt a shocking amount of magic from the black mud. It would be better to say that the black mud was the magic power of the Holy Grail after it had been materialized. However, this mana was no longer pure. Instead, it had been tainted with a curse and had become mana with a cursed nature. Therefore, Rin and Osaka and Saber's expression changed when they saw the violent resentment rising from the black mud. They could not help but take a step back. "Hee, little girl from the Osaka family, the Night King of the Sword Spirits, are you the only two here?" A sinister laugh came from above and entered Rin and Osaka and Saber's ears. The two girls' expressions froze as their hearts sank. Chapter 809. Gulp. Gulp. In the middle of the creeping sound, the large piece of meat in the middle of the lake moved. Every time it moved, the huge piece of meat would obviously increase in size. It was constantly increasing in size, and it looked very disgusting. However, above such a disgusting chunk of meat, below the dark hole, between the hole in the air and the chunk of meat below, Tong Zongyan, who only had his head left, was hovering in the air, surrounded by a swarm of insects. He looked at the black mud that was pouring down like a waterfall and let out an extremely unpleasant, ear-piercing laugh. After 500 years of waiting, this old man has finally waited for this moment. Hearing the unpleasant laughter, Saber's face became serious, while Rin Enbin revealed a look of disgust. "Dirty inkstone of Jiantong, what is your purpose?" "Goal?" Naoki Nakajima turned around. To be more precise, he turned his head around and looked down at Rin Enbin. "Well, at this point, it doesn't matter if I tell you. Little girl from the Enbin family, my goal is to obtain immortality." "Immortal?" Rin Enbin's gaze towards Jiantong dirty inkstone turned contemptuous. "You obtained the Holy Grail for this?" It was only natural for Rin Osaka to be so disdainful. After all, for a magician, immortality was never the first goal. Reaching the origin was the only goal of a magician. In front of this goal, no matter what it was, it could be abandoned. Including life. What magicians were most afraid of was not losing their lives, but not being able to study magic and reach the final destination, the origin. If Enbin pursued immortality in order to continue studying magic and reach the origin, then it was understandable. But now, the hole to the origin had been opened. Moreover, it was right in front of Enban. If it was to reach the origin, then Enban's current goal could be said to have already achieved half of it. Although it was only a hole to the origin, and if one wanted to go through this hole to reach the origin, it would certainly give rise to all kinds of problems that needed to be overcome. However, the entrance was already opened, and there was no need to pursue immortality. Therefore, it was very obvious that the purpose of Jiantong's dirty inkstone's pursuit of immortality was not the origin, but rather its own immortality. As a magician, how could Rin Enban not feel disdain? Little girl, the pursuit of life is human instinct. If possible, who would want to die? Even if it's a magician, how many people would be willing to sacrifice their own life in order to reach the origin? Tong Zongyan seemed to have sensed Rin's disdain towards him from his expression, and he laughed sinisterly without a care. What's more, I've been struggling at death's door for 500 years. If I don't obtain eternal life, my body will completely rot away. Wah! What? Saber, who was holding the holy sword, gasped. You've lived for 500 years? It wasn't just Saber. Even Rin and Osaka was surprised. Rin Enban had heard that some magicians would think of ways to extend their lifespan in order to extend their lives and continue researching magic. They would even change their life forms and reincarnate into vampires. As a result, the lifespan of some magicians differed greatly from their appearance. However, 500 years wasn't a short period of time. In front of them was a magician who had lived for more than 500 years. How could Rin Enban and Saber not be surprised? There's nothing strange about it. The magic of the Mezatong family was originally to use insect-type familiars. I just stuffed my soul into the worm and continued to survive by eating other people's bodies as a substitute. As long as the brain worm that contains the soul is still there, I can continue to survive through parasitism. Tong Zongyan seemed to feel that there was no need to hide his secret anymore. He didn't mince his words and directly revealed his secret. However, this method still can't achieve true immortality because the parasitized body will continue to be worn down and will need to change bodies frequently. Moreover, even if this body has a long lifespan, it will still be a human. After living far longer than a human's lifespan, my soul will have long since decayed. One day, even my soul will wither away. Therefore, in order to achieve true immortality, I need the Holy Grail. I see. So this is the reason why you still can't die even after becoming like this? Saber stared at Tong Zongyan. That body is only borrowed. As long as your soul vessel is still there, you won't die. Even the heroic spirits won't be able to kill you. But on the other hand, as long as your soul vessel is found, even an ordinary human can kill you, right? That's right, Night King. Tong Zongyan laughed sinisterly. See? What kind of immortality was this? Full of weaknesses? What I need is to truly not age and not die. Without any weaknesses. Without any limitations. Immortality that will never die. But, do you think you can do it? Rin Enban said sarcastically. Don't forget, the Holy Grail has already been contaminated. It's no longer a simple wish-granting device. Moreover, this little Holy Grail is something that you rushed to create. It can't be used to grant wishes anymore, right? Actually, even if it was contaminated, the function of the Holy Grail that could grant wishes still hadn't changed. However, if a wish was made to the contaminated Holy Grail, the method of granting the wish would often be carried out in the direction of evil. For example, if a wish was to obtain money that could never be spent, then the Holy Grail would kill all the rich people in the world and provide their money to the wish maker. Under such circumstances, once Tong Zongyan made a wish for immortality, then the Holy Grail would definitely extract the lives of other humans and provide it to Tong Zongyan, extending his life until all the lives of humans in the world were extracted. In addition, once the current Holy Grail was released, it would begin to release all the evil in this world, evoking the calamity of calamities until all the humans who were supposed to be cursed were destroyed. Tong Zhao Yen, who was also cursed by the humans, would definitely not be able to obtain true immortality. In this regard, Tong Zhangyan laughed maniacally. That's something that this old man needs to worry about. It has nothing to do with you little girls. Hearing this, Rin and Osaka and Saber understood. If the Holy Grail could really help Tong Zhangyan realize his wish for immortality, then Tong Zhangyan definitely wouldn't mind extracting the lives of all the humans in the world and concentrating them on himself, right? After all, he was a scum that could turn his own grandson and granddaughter into monsters without hesitation. You really are as dangerous as Gilgamesh, Tong Zhangyan. Saber raised the holy sword in her hand, pointed it at Tong Zhangyan, and said with a face full of determination. I will definitely not let you succeed. I will definitely destroy you and the Holy Grail together. That's it, Tong Zhangyan. Rin and Osaka stared at Tong Zhangyan and said with an emotionless voice. No matter what, even if you have lived for more than 500 years, you are still no match for a servant. Not to mention, you are facing the strongest of the 7 classes, Saber's servant. You should just disappear here with the Holy Grail that you desire. Hee hee. Ha. Ha 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 ha. Tong Zhangyan suddenly laughed and said such a sentence. Little girl, do you think this old man doesn't understand something that even you understand? Why do you think I lured you all here? Lured? Rin and Osaka and Saber's hearts skipped a beat. At this moment, Saber seemed to have felt something. She suddenly turned her head and looked behind Rin and Osaka. There, a wave of black mud that was like a lurking python suddenly jumped up and turned into a black mud flow, enveloping Rin and Osaka's direction. Rin. Saber did not hesitate and directly rushed out. She leaned to the side and sent Rin and Osaka flying. Then, the black mud flowed down and enveloped Saber, who had replaced Rin and Osaka's position. Chapter 8:10. Saber. When Noah and Ryder were about to see the lake, Rin Tozaka's voice echoed in Noah and Ryder's ears. Hearing this voice, Noah and Ryder knew that something had happened. Something had happened. At that moment, both Noah and Ryder increased their speed to the maximum. Like a gust of wind, they dashed through the forest, bringing with them a lot of dead branches and leaves. Not long after, the full view of the lake was exposed in front of Noah and Ryder. Noah looked around almost immediately, taking in the entire surrounding scene into his field of vision. In the center of the lake, there was a huge piece of meat that was constantly growing. Above the huge piece of meat, there was a black hole that was constantly pouring out black mud. Floating in the middle of the black hole and the huge piece of meat, there was a stone that was surrounded by insects. There was also Rin Tozaka, who was half kneeling on the ground, holding the stone tightly with a face full of regret. In front of Rin Tozaka, there was a swamp of black mud. In it, Saber, who was holding the sacred sword, was bathed in the black mud. Her body seemed to be pressed to the ground by the black mud. Her face was full of pain and she kept struggling, but no matter how hard she struggled, it was to no avail. Under such circumstances, the armor on Saber's body gradually turned pitch black, and even her hair began to turn platinum. It could be seen that Saber was desperately trying to resist the corrosion of the black mud. However, under the situation where Saber was entangled by the black mud was constantly replenishing her. Layers upon layers of black mud covered Saber's body, causing Saber's resistance to become weaker and weaker. The color of her armor and hair also changed more frequently. Seeing Saber like this, Noah's mind flashed with the words Gilgamesh had said when they first met. The hero king said that if a servant bathed in the black mud, their soul would be contaminated and they would become crazy. Only Gilgamesh was not contaminated after bathing in the black mud. Instead, he gained a body from the black mud and became able to appear in this world without consuming magic power. Clearly, Saber did not have the same ability as Gilgamesh. Under the corrosion of the layers of black mud, the servant seemed to be gradually turning black. On the other hand, Tong Zhangyan was surprised by Saber's darkening, or rather, Saber's resistance. You can still resist? Was it because the Holy Grail that Shin Er made in a hurry was too flawed? The strength of the curse has decreased compared to the previous Holy Grail war. Noah's expression turned cold. Just as he was about to step forward, Rin Enben's voice rang out. It's useless. That old monster is no longer human. Even if you destroy his head, he won't die unless you find the brain worm that contains his soul. So, let's save Saber first. Master, Ryder, who was standing behind Noah, said softly. I'll go rescue Saber. No, Noah rejected without hesitation. Servants can't touch the black mud, or they will be contaminated like the Holy Grail. Hearing this, Ryder raised his eyebrows. Since Saber can resist to a certain extent, then with my attack power, should be able to rescue Saber and then escape. Saber can resist the black mud because Sakura used her final command spell. Rin Enben gritted his teeth and said. Because I couldn't come with you, I left a gem with Xiaoying in advance. As long as that gem breaks, Xiaoying will immediately use the final command spell to support Saber. Just now, I have already triggered the gem spell. The gem on Xiaoying's side should have already broken, so Xiaoying must have used the final command spell to give Saber additional magic to resist the black mud. However, if that's the case, she won't be able to resist for long. Rin Tozaka didn't say this out loud, but Noah and Ryder understood what he meant. Master. Ryder looked at Noah. Through Ryder's blindfold, Noah seemed to be able to see Ryder's eyes. He nodded knowingly and raised one hand above his head. Buzz. Suddenly, the remaining 2 command seals on the back of Noah's hand that was raised high above his head blurred. Noah used the remaining 2 command spells at once. At this point, including the command spell he used to summon Ryder during the battle with Lancer, Noah's 3 command spells were all used up. Bang! Ryder's body suddenly exploded with a shocking amount of magical power. The magical power from the 2 command spells and Noah's own magical power that was drawn to the A++ level overlapped with each other. It was like a madly flowing river, surging inside and outside of Ryder's body. Without any hesitation, Ryder charged into the black mud, charging towards Saber's direction. Since Saber could resist a little with 1 command spell, then with 2 command spells and the support from Noah's magical power, there was no reason why Ryder couldn't resist. That way, Ryder would be able to rescue Saber. As for Noah, all he needed to do was to kill the last contemptible scum. Jiantong Dirty Inkstone. Noah raised his head and looked in the direction of Jiantong Dirty Inkstone. His eyes revealed complete indifference. This time, you can't run away, right? No, you're wrong, kid. Jiantong Dirty Inkstone laughed strangely. I don't need to run away. The thing that I've been pursuing for so long is right in front of me. How can I run away? I want to obtain true immortality, and no one can stop me. Even if you're stronger than me, if you can't kill me, then it's useless. Immortality? Noah narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. Your goal is to obtain immortality? Then why didn't you say so earlier? Noah's sudden words made Jiantong Dirty Inkstone stunned. What do you mean? Noah didn't speak, but only raised one hand. Wang. The next moment, a golden ripple fluctuated above Noah's palm. That's... Jiantong Dirty Inkstone was shocked. The Hero King's treasure? Ignoring Jiantong Dirty Inkstone's shock, Noah reached his hand into the fluctuating golden ripple and pulled out an item. It was just a blade of grass. It was a stalk of grass that was surrounded by specks of starlight. From that stalk of grass that was surrounded by specks of starlight, everyone present felt a refreshing spiritual energy, proving that it was not ordinary. Jiantong Dirty Inkstone instinctively felt a desire from the blade of grass, making his mouth open and close. With a trembling voice, he squeezed out a question. What? What is that? Noah looked at the inkstone as if he was looking at something that he could patiently ponder over. He said these words while looking at the inkstone. You should know that when Gilgamesh was alive, he once embarked on a journey to the underworld in search of immortality. He crossed thousands of mountains and rivers and experienced all kinds of hardships. In the end, he obtained an immortal herb in the underworld that could allow one to obtain immortality, but it was secretly eaten by a snake, right? Noah's words made Jiantong Dirty Inkstone's heart suddenly tremble. He stared at the blade of grass in Noah's hand. Could it be? That is, you guessed right. Jiantong Dirty Inkstone, this is the magic herb that can make people immortality. Noah said with a faint smile. Don't you want to be immortal? This is the elixir that you have been dreaming of. Jiantong Dirty Inkstone, who had already guessed it, trembled after getting Noah's confirmation. Ah! With a meaningless cry, Jiantong Dirty Inkstone stared at the magic herb in Noah's hand. His throat, which was not connected to his body, actually made a swallowing sound. The immortality that he had been dreaming of was right in front of him. How could Jiantong Dirty Inkstone not be excited? As a result, Jiantong Dirty Inkstone did not notice it at all. There was only coldness in Noah's eyes. Chapter 8:11. The immortal herb, which was surrounded by specks of starlight, seemed to want to expel the curse that existed in this space. The spiritual chi it emitted made the air a little fresher. Looking at the immortal herb that Noah held in front of him, Visera Jiantong kept trembling. One could imagine how excited he was. Visera Jiantong would not suspect that the immortal herb in Noah's hand was fake. Although he did not know why Noah had such a divine object that only appeared in the mythological era, the spiritual chi emitted from the immortal herb gave Visera Jiantong an instinctive desire. That was the expression of Visera Jiantong's soul, which was about to decay, longed for new vitality. Visera Jiantong's instinct told his master. He needed that immortal herb. That stalk of immortal grass was definitely a genuine spirit medicine that could not age or die. This fact made Visera Jiantong both excited and jealous. Of course, there was no need to mention how excited he was. That was something that Visera Jiantong had pursued for many years. Now that it had appeared in front of Visera Jiantong, how could Visera Jiantong not be excited? As for jealousy and hatred, it was jealousy and hatred towards Noah. What this old man has dreamed of for hundreds of years, you, a brat who has lived for less than 20 years, actually has. Visera Jiantong said somewhat gloomily. How did you get that immortal herb? How I got it should have nothing to do with you, right? Noah said sarcastically. You just need to know that the thing you dream of is now in my hands. That's enough. Ha! Visera Jiantong's voice became louder. And then? What are you going to do with that immortal herb? Are you going to give it to me? When he said this, Visera Jiantong's skull-like face was full of ridicule and jealousy. Visera Jiantong did not believe that Noah would give him the immortal herb that could make people immortal. That was a divine object that could give people eternal life. Who would give such a divine object to someone else? Actually, Tong Zhangyan just felt very unbalanced in his heart. Why was it that a little brat who hadn't even lived for 20 years could easily obtain something that he had pursued for hundreds of years? If there was a God in this world, wouldn't that be too unfair? Filled with such a thought full of jealousy, Zhangyan never thought that if God really existed, how could he give immortal life to such a vicious and evil person? Noah, who took in the jealousy and hatred in Visceral Inkstone's eyes, smiled, and his smile was unusually cruel. I took this immortal herb out just to tell you a fact. The truth? Zhangyan Jiantong was stunned. What facts? Noah glanced at the Tong Ziyan. In the next moment, he slowly released his hand that was holding the immortal grass. The immortal grass, which was surrounded by specks of starlight, freely fell to the ground and gently landed on the ground. Seeing Noah throw the immortal grass on the ground, Zhangyan Jiantong's eyes widened, and his heart trembled. He believed that anyone who saw the thing he dreamed of being casually thrown on the ground by someone else would have the same reaction as Zhangyan Jiantong. However, in the next moment, what happened in front of Zhangyan Jiantong really made him go crazy. Noah raised one of his feet, directly stepped forward, and stomped down heavily. Pa dash. The immortal grass, which was surrounded by specks of starlight and could give people immortal life, was enough to make any human go crazy. Just like that, under the furious gaze of Zhangyan Jiantong, it was crushed by Noah. Zhangyan Jiantong's entire mind went blank with a bang. Under such circumstances, Noah's sarcastic voice drilled into his blank mind. A disgusting old worm like you, who is neither human nor ghost, wants to live an immortal life? Dream on. The impact of the thing he dreamed of being ruined in front of his eyes and Noah's words, which were like adding oil to the fire, made Zhangyan Jiantong's already rotten soul surge with a sense of complete violence, which made him go crazy. You damn brat. Dash. Enduring the pain of his soul gradually rotting away, Zhao Yan of Jiantong used 500 years to continuously and painstakingly manage it. He even did not hesitate to completely degenerate into an evil spirit, just for the immortal life that the immortal grass brought. However, the thing that he had painstakingly pursued for 500 years and dreamed of was not only easily obtained by a brat who had lived for less than 20 years, but also crushed in front of him. Zhangyan Jiantong only felt that his mind had been completely filled with dark emotions, and his whole person had fallen into a state of madness. At that moment, the insects surrounding Zhangyan Jiantong flew out like a swarm of locusts, swarming in the direction of Noah. Almost every one of those insects had the ability to devour a human by themselves. It was only a matter of time. They were even more terrifying than piranhas. In the face of such a swarm of locust-like insects, Noah acted as if he did not see anything. He stared at the crazy Zhangyan Jiantong and murmured softly. What's wrong? Are you in pain? Are you angry? Do you feel that you can't vent the pain and anger in your heart if you don't cut me into pieces? Like an erupting volcano, Noah's dark and deep eyes surged with a violent emotion. Then who should littling vent her pain and anger on? The moment he finished speaking, a terrifying wave of magic suddenly rose from Noah's body. Like a shock wave, it shook in all directions. Dong! The locust-like swarm of insects were directly annihilated by the shockwave of magic power. Like moths drawn to a flame, they were incinerated one after another like flames. After I learned what you did to littling from Zhangyan Shinji, I had already decided. With a violent wave of magic rolling in his body, Noah raised his eyes and pierced his cold gaze directly in the direction of Zhangyan Jiantong like a sharp sword. You will definitely die. Looking at Noah, who was surging with amazing magic, Zhangyan Jiantong felt a sense of fear in his heart. However, the madness of his dreams and ambitions being ruined by Noah dispelled this fear, and made Zhangyan Jiantong hysterical. You are the one who should die. Damn brat. Accompanied by Zhangyan Jiantong's hysterical roar, the black mud surging in the lake suddenly surged violently, like a stormy sea, and covered the direction of Noah. Noah obviously furrowed his brows when he saw the murky black mud. Even Rin and Osaka and Saber could feel the curse and resentment in the black mud. How could Noah, with his outstanding sensing ability, not feel it? The extremely shocking curse in the black mud made Noah, with his outstanding sensing ability, feel as if he had been thrown into a volcano. The surrounding air was filled with the smell of sulfuric acid, which was extremely uncomfortable. In addition, the black mud was so filthy, who would want to be touched by it? Noah naturally did not want to be drenched by the turbid mud. As for the curse, it was not a problem for Noah. However, Noah did not want to avoid it. Is this what you're relying on? Noah stood motionless in the same place, only looking at the surging black mud, and said so. Since that's the case, then let me succeed with what you rely on. Therefore, Noah, who had no intention of avoiding it, slowly closed his eyes. Ha 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 ha. Stupid kid. You actually took the initiative to bear the curse that can kill all humans in the world? What an idiot. Fine. You can experience all the evil in this world. Have a taste of a curse that weighs billions. The next moment, in the midst of Zhangyan Jiantong's wild laughter, Noah's body was directly covered by the black mud. At the last moment, Noah seemed to have heard Rin and Osaka's scream, and also saw Ryder, who threw Saber to the ground in his arms, recklessly rushing over. At this time, Noah felt as if he had sunk into a swamp, constantly sinking, and was constantly being squeezed by the surrounding resentment and curses. Opening his eyes, Noah's deep dark eyes flashed with a flash of light. Then, Noah's voice gently sounded. "Let's begin." Chapter 8:12. Noah's body emitted smoke as if he was being burned by fire. He continued to sink into the darkness without a bottom. Feeling the pain from his skin, Noah's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. The curse from the surroundings was like a materialized wave of resentment and malice, constantly squeezing Noah's body and drilling into Noah's body through Noah's body. Unfortunately, the billions of curse that could kill all the humans in the world suddenly trembled and disappeared the moment it entered Noah's body. Noah had 3 major constitutions. One of them was that he was immune to all negative forces. Negative forces such as poisoning, cursing, or weakening were not effective on Noah. Therefore, even if there were billions of curses from all the evil in the world, there was still no way to shake Noah's body. It was just that there was no way to avoid the damage caused by the curse. Looking at his smoking skin that was burned by the curse, Noah smacked his lips. It's so dense that it can cause substantial damage. As expected of a curse with billions of weight. I'm afraid that if such a curse were to spread on the street, everything would be burned to ashes. Fortunately, Noah's body could be immune to the effects of the curse, so the substantial damage was minimized. Of course, even so, the feeling of his skin being burned was not good. Let's hurry up and end this quickly. With such a thought, Noah turned his hand and something suddenly appeared in his palm. It was a mass of black light connected head to tail like an Ouroboros. Seeing this mass of black light, it was believed that anyone would associate it with a creature. Snake. That was the snake that Noah obtained from Orpheus. It was the power of the snake from Orpheus that could enhance people's strength with infinite possibilities. Ever since he obtained the snake from Orpheus, Noah would study it whenever he was free in an attempt to unravel the secret of Orpheus' unlimited power. After this period of research, Noah really did find something. Noah found that the power of Orpheus' snake had not been depleted at all. No matter what kind of existence it was, if it fell into the long flow of time, it would be depleted. Even the hardest steel would begin to rust after a period of time. No matter how old a tree was, after a long time, it would still decay one day. While people were alive, their life was constantly being depleted. Even if it was magical power, if it was left alone, it would gradually dissipate. At least, in the absence of special circumstances, almost everything was like this. There were very few who could achieve true eternity. But Orpheus' snake did not have the slightest damage no matter how long it was left. Obviously, Orpheus' power belonged to those few special circumstances. Then, what was the key that made Orpheus' power to be said to be eternity? Cycle. Orpheus' power had always been in a state of cycle. After discovering this, Noah understood the origin of Orpheus' unlimited power. If a straight line extended out, no matter how long it was, when it stopped, it would be the end. However, if a straight line were to form a circle, it would never be able to see the end. Orpheus' power had always been in a state of cycle, forming a state where it was not depleted. Under such circumstances, even if it was left alone, Orpheus' snake would enter a state of cycle, so that the power would not be depleted with the passage of time, but would follow a circular path as time passed, not allowing it to be depleted at all. If Noah absorbed Orpheus' snake, the power in it would be dispersed, eliminating the state of cycle, and adding to the user's power. However, if this snake was not dispersed, that is, if he did not absorb the power in it, but let it maintain the state of cycle, and then integrate it into his body, what would it become? Then, the power that had been in a cycle would become a foundation. Instead of absorbing the power, he would inject the power into it in reverse. In this way, the power that was injected into the snake would also enter a state of cycle. No matter how it operated, there would be no depletion. No matter how it circulated, there would be no end. It could be said to be unlimited. Noah wanted to turn this snake into the foundation of his power. That is, the unlimited foundation of magic. Without any hesitation, Noah pressed the snake in his hand on his body. Wang. With a tremor, the power called snake integrated into Noah's body. Normally, at this time, Orpheus' snake would turn into pure power and be absorbed by the user to strengthen himself. However, the moment that the snake entered his body, Noah used his mind to guide it. Instead of absorbing it, he guided it to the depths of his body. Immediately, the magic in Noah's body surged like a flood, and with a violent momentum, it was continuously added to the power of the snake. Wang, 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 wang. The snake that originally belonged to Orpheus not only became bigger and bigger under Noah's magic, but also seemed to be dyed. The dark color gradually faded and was replaced by pure white bit by bit. Then, the aura and waves that belonged to Orpheus that surged on the snake gradually changed to Noah's aura and waves. If it was Orpheus' snake before, then now, it was Noah's snake. Next, what Noah needed to do was to make this snake into a foundation. A foundation that had no limits. At that time, this foundation would become Noah's source of magic, providing Noah with endless magic. To achieve this goal, the cycle that existed in the snake must be continuously expanded. It was like making a hole. Noah was about to make a bottomless hole. And the project that this process required would all be carried out with magic. If he wanted to make a real bottomless hole, the amount of magic that would need to be consumed was simply terrifying. Noah's magic was terrifying, but there was no guarantee that it would be enough. And once there was a lack of magic at a critical moment, the foundation that was obtained with great difficulty would be completely scrapped. Therefore, Noah had never tried. However, it was different now. Noah could sense that the curse around him that was constantly drilling into his body had been eliminated by his physique and turned into pure mana. That was the magic from the Great Holy Grail. Before the start of each Holy Grail War, Fuyuki City's Great Holy Grail would absorb enough magic power from Fuyuki City's land vein that was connected to the so-called infinite source of magic power and accumulate it. Now, the magic accumulated in the Great Holy Grail had become a pure curse because of the pollution of all the evil in this world. When the small Holy Grail used the stored spirit of the servant to open the hole that led to the outside of the world, the source, the magic of the Great Holy Grail, that was supposed to be used to fix the hole turned into a curse and naturally flowed out of the hole. In other words, the black mud that flowed out of the holes was actually the magic power of the curse. Once the curse was removed, it would be restored to pure magic. Therefore, when the curse that entered Noah's body was eliminated by Noah's constitution, it would be restored to pure magic. This pure magic would become Noah's help. Noah's own vast magic might not be enough to create an infinite source of magic. Then, with the Great Holy Grail, that could be said to be infinite magic, what would happen if both sides worked together? Hum 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 hum. The pure white snake in Noah's body was constantly filled with magic and constantly trembled. On top of it, the magic that was in a state of circulation was crazily accelerating, following the circular path of an Ouroboros that was connected from head to tail, like a surging wave, crazily flowing. At the same time, the curse that flowed into Noah's body was constantly being transformed into pure magic, and similarly violently surged into the frequently trembling white light that was connected from head to tail. Walala. Suddenly, the black mud surrounding Noah was like flowing water, constantly being absorbed into Noah's body, creating a scene of a black whirlpool rolling around Noah's body. And the black mud, at a speed visible to the naked eye, disappeared. Chapter 8:13. Cough cough, Saber, who was rescued by Ryder from the black mud, immediately knelt down on one knee as if she had just been fished out of water. She coughed uncontrollably as if she was choking on water. However, Saber's armor, which was gradually turning black, was slowly returning to its original color. Her platinum hair was also slowly returning to its original golden color. This told Rin and Osaka that Saber had escaped from her predicament. Saber. Rin also knelt down on one knee as he supported Saber. Seeing that Saber's condition was slowly fading away, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. On the other side, after Ryder confirmed Saber's condition, he turned his head and looked in Noah's direction. Then, his expression changed. This was because Ryder had seen it. He saw Noah being swallowed by the surging black mud without the slightest bit of resistance or evasion. Ha 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 ha. Stupid kid. You actually took the initiative to bear a curse that could kill all humans in the world? What an idiot. Fine. You can experience all the evil in this world. Have a taste of a curse that weighs billions. Tong Shinobi also saw this scene and let out a maniacal laugh. Oh no. Rin Enbin exclaimed. Saber, who was gasping for breath, bit her lips. As for Ryder, the moment he saw Noah being swallowed by the black mud, he shot out like an arrow from a bow. Without any hesitation, he rushed into the black mud. This time, both Rin Enbin and Saber were shocked. Don't go. As a servant, once they touched the black mud, they would be corrupted. It was a powerful curse that only Gilgamesh, the hero king, could escape. The reason why Saber and Ryder were able to resist the curse was not only because of the blessing of the command curse, but also because the small holy grail, Shinji Tsushima, had too many flaws, which caused the curse flowing out of the holes of the holy grail to weaken a lot. Because of these two reasons, Saber and Ryder were able to resist the curse. But now, Saber's blessing from the command curse had been used up. Ryder had 2 command curses to support him, so he still had some left. However, he definitely wouldn't be able to last long. When that time comes, Ryder, who had lost the command curse, would be swallowed by the black mud. Ryder clearly understood this as well. However, Ryder still rushed toward the black mud without hesitation. His whole body was submerged in the black mud that was surging like waves. He kept rushing toward Noah's direction. How stupid. It's fine if the master is stupid, but I didn't expect the servant to be so stupid as well. Tong Shinobi seemed to vent his anger as he laughed. Is this the so-called hero? How stupid. Saber, who was being supported by Rin Enbin, glared at Tong Shinobi. She wanted to raise the holy sword in her hand, but because of her physical strength, she immediately put it. Saber, Saber. Don't worry, Rin Enbin said softly as he looked at Ryder, who was rushing into the black mud while supporting Saber. It's okay. That guy won't be affected by this curse so easily. He can even fight against the Night King Artoria and the great hero Hercules. He even defeated the hero King Gilgamesh. How could he die here? It was as if he was confirming Rin Enbin's words. In the next instant, the black mud that was surging like waves suddenly paused. Soon after, it began to surge crazily in an even more berserk manner. However, this time, the black mud that had turned into waves no longer surged aimlessly. Instead, it flowed in a certain direction and began to swirl. Gradually, with the destination of the flow as the center, it began to spin like a whirlpool. The sudden abnormality stunned everyone present. What's wrong? Tong Shinobi's laughter suddenly stopped. What happened? Ryder, who was rushing into the black mud, suddenly stopped. With a leap, he returned to Rin Enbin and Saber's side. Seeing Ryder's action, Rin Enbin and Saber understood what was going on, and their eyes lit up. Then, under the watchful eyes of everyone present, the black mud that filled the entire lake flowed out from the hole of the Holy Grail and joined the whirlpool at an astonishing speed, surging towards the center of the whirlpool. In just a short time, the black mud that was about to overflow from the lake was reduced by a lot. It was all absorbed by the whirlpool. It should be said that it was absorbed by a figure in the center of the whirlpool. The murky black mud was continuously flowing from Noah's body, who was standing in the center of the whirlpool with his eyes closed. It seeped into Noah's body and was absorbed at an astonishing speed. Although he had clearly absorbed such a shocking amount of curse and mana, Noah's aura didn't seem to be in a frenzy at all. On the contrary, the waves of mana were reduced, and they slowly disappeared along with the absorbed black mud. Under such circumstances, Noah's aura became more and more profound, becoming more and more unfathomable. Impossible. Tong Shinobi's face was full of shock as he shouted out loud. He actually took the initiative to absorb the cursed power into his body? How could he be fine? As if in response to Tong Shinobi's shock, the black mud that was flowing out of the hole of the Holy Grail became more and more turbulent. It was as if it was trying to make Noah explode after absorbing it. It continuously turned into a stream of mud and rushed towards Noah's direction. However, no matter how much the black mud that was full of curses tried to fill up, Noah's body was like a bottomless pit. It did not reject it, and there was no sign of it being filled up. Immediately, Noah's aura became more restrained. Although they did not know what was going on, there was no doubt that after absorbing billions of curses, Noah was not affected at all. Instead, he seemed to be breaking through. Don't even think about it. Tong Shinobi, who had recovered from the shock, did not care about anything else. He directly drove his remaining head and bit in the direction of Noah. However, just as Zhangyan Jian-tong rushed in Noah's direction, a gaze that made Zhangyan Jian-tong feel a sense of crisis like the shadow of death was cast on Zhangyan Jian-tong's head. Suddenly, a wave of magic power, accompanied by the sight, tightly wrapped around Tong Shinobi's head, making the flying head of Tong Shinobi freeze in midair. Crack! The next second, such a sound was heard. It was not the sound of cracking, but the sound of something being condensed like ice. What was condensed was naturally Tong Shinobi's head. It could be seen that the head of Tong Shinobi was starting from the neck, and gray marks were constantly climbing up. What? Tong Shinobi's face changed abruptly. Petrification? Yes. Petrification. Tong Shinobi's head was being petrified at a speed visible to the naked eye. What caused Tong Shinobi's head to be petrified was the sight that was projected with magic power fluctuations. It was Ryder's sight. At this moment, Ryder, who was standing beside Rin Enbin and Saber, had his eye mask removed, revealing a pair of white eyes that were like the pupils of a snake. Under the gaze of that pair of eyes, Tong Shinobi was being petrified bit by bit. Petrification demon eye? Rin Enbin was shocked. Medusa? Anything that was stared at by Medusa's eyes would be turned into stone. This was a mythical story that everyone knew. At this point, Ryder finally released his petrification demon eye and turned Tong Shinobi's foundation into stone. No. Tong Shinobi only had time to let out such a scream before his mouth turned into stone. Not long after, Tong Shinobi's entire head was completely petrified. He fell from midair into the black mud and was swallowed by it. It wasn't until Tong Zhangyan's head was petrified and fell into the black mud that Ryder put the blindfold back on his eyes, sealing the famous magic eye back in. The scene returned to silence. Only the whirlpool's rolling sound lingered, and it did not subside for a long time. Chapter 8:14. Walala. Like a whirlpool, the black mud continuously filled Noah's body. Under the influence of Noah's physique, it was quickly purified and turned into pure magic power. Then, like a torrent, it surged into the pure white ball of light in Noah's body. At this time, Noah's magic power was already exhausted. Like a whirlpool, the black mud that was absorbed into Noah's body and turned into pure magic power gradually became less and less, causing the magic power that was poured into the pure white ball of light to become less and less. Noah, who was well aware of the situation in his body, could only pray. He prayed that the magic power from the Great Holy Grail was enough to transform the pure white ball of light. Otherwise, the infinite foundation that he had obtained with great difficulty would be wasted. Just like this, under Noah's prayer, the magic power that flowed into Noah's body became less and less, until finally, there was only a small stream left. At this time, even Noah couldn't help but become anxious. Could it be that his idea of an infinite magic power source was wrong? Using Orpheus's snake that represented an infinite cycle as the foundation, and then pouring a huge amount of magic power into the cycle, was the idea of creating a magic power source that could hold an infinite amount of magic power wrong? In the end, the world still favored Noah. Buzz. At a certain moment, the pure white ball of light that was constantly absorbing a huge amount of magic power suddenly trembled and stopped absorbing magic power. Noticing this, Noah's spirit was lifted. It was also at this moment that a change began. Buzz! Almost in an instant, the entire pure white ball of light suddenly expanded, setting off a terrifying energy whirlpool, causing the pure white ball of light's volume to rapidly expand. In an instant, it expanded to its limit. Bang! A corner of the pure white ball of light suddenly exploded. Bang 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 bang. This explosion, like a chain reaction, caused the rest of the pure white ball of light to explode one after another. Boom! In the end, the entire pure white ball of light directly exploded. That scene was like an egg that was about to hatch. The pure white ball of light's eggshell was forcefully opened. Thus, a black hole-like hole appeared in Noah's body. That was a hole that was slowly swallowing the fragments of the pure white ball of light that had exploded. While rotating by itself, traces of terrifying fluctuations were surging out of the hole. Perhaps because it had swallowed too much magic power from the Holy Grail, that hole was very similar to the Holy Grail outside that hole that led to the source. Its entire body was dark black, and its interior was filled with dark blue spots of light that resembled starlight. It looked extremely beautiful, causing the entire cave to be covered in a halo of light. Noah muttered in his heart as he looked into the dark hole in his body. Is this the infinite mana source that was formed after the transformation? In the next moment, Noah's body. As the mana in his body was completely depleted, Noah's mana began to gradually recover like steam. Wang! When Noah's body began to generate mana, the black hole-like hole suddenly erupted with a suction force, sucking in all the mana that had just been generated and swallowing it. Of course, the devoured magic power did not disappear, but was stored in the void. Noah could feel that although the mana generated in his body was completely devoured and stored in the void, he could easily mobilize and use the mana in the void. Realizing this, Noah's heart was filled with joy. This was because Noah's idea had succeeded. Using Orpheus' snake as the base, using the characteristic of the infinite cycle, he filled it with a huge amount of magic power to expand the degree, strength, and intensity of the cycle. In the end, the snake would reach its original form, like Orpheus, which could be said to be infinite, evolving into a source of magic with no limit. When this limitless source of mana was born, Noah would be able to store mana in it. It was just a simple idea. However, it was such a simple idea that could bring amazing benefits to Noah. It seemed to be a simple storage function, but Noah could continuously store mana in it. This was a great use. It should be known that the human body was limited. If the human body was a container, and mana was water, when the container was filled with water, the container called human would naturally be unable to contain any more water called mana. It was the same for Noah. If there was a container that could hold water indefinitely, then water could continuously flow in, causing the container to only have more and more water. There was no limit. Wasn't this infinite? Usually, when his mana was full, Noah would naturally be unable to generate mana and increase the capacity of his mana. Now, with a limitless source of mana, Noah's body would continuously generate mana and store it in the limitless source of mana. When he needed to use it, he would take it out of the source of mana. If he was not using it normally, the mana in the source of mana would always be in a state of increasing. Wasn't this equivalent to having infinite mana? Although it was not the same as Orpheus' infinite possibilities, this was Noah's infinity. Noah's mana was already very amazing. Once it was consumed, the speed of recovery was also amazing. In addition, Noah could also use the elf incarnation. Under the state of using the elf incarnation, his mana would also recover at a terrifying speed. If he were to store mana with this recovery speed, it would be simply amazing. After all, under normal circumstances, even if all his mana was consumed, once he used the elf incarnation, Noah would be able to recover all his mana in 2 to 3 hours. In other words, after using the elf incarnation for 2 to 3 hours, Noah would be able to obtain mana equivalent to his peak state. In this way, If Noah kept using the elf incarnation and stored the recovered mana in the source of mana, 2 to 3 hours would be equivalent to his peak state of mana. 5 to 6 hours would be equivalent to his peak state of mana. 10 to 20 hours would be equivalent to his peak state of mana and more than 3 times his peak state of mana. Then, if he kept on using his mana, why would he need to worry about running out of mana? Therefore, with this limitless source of mana, in the future, Noah's mana would only increase and would definitely not decrease, reaching the true meaning of infinity. When Noah opened his eyes again, the sky had already begun to brighten. Seeing the edge of the sky that had begun to glow, Noah could not help but stare blankly, and then his heart tightened. Could it be that it took him a long time to develop the limitless source of mana? That Tong Guang inkstone. Thinking of this, before Noah had time to react, several voices entered his ears. Noah, Master. With Rin Enben as the leader, Saber, Ryder, and the other girls all gathered around Noah. Rin Enben was the first to squeeze in front of Noah and shouted at Noah. You finally know to wake up? Idiot. Being shouted at by Rin Enben, Noah could not help but take a step back, but he still hurriedly spoke. Could it be that it has been a long time? It has already been a night. Rin Enben shouted in exasperation. Thanks to you, we were also at a loss for the entire night. Do you want us to die of anxiety? Rin is right. Saber, who was standing behind Rin Enben, also frowned, as if she was somewhat angry. If the problem of the Holy Grail had not been solved along with it, then we would have been very troubled, Noah. After Saber said this, Noah realized. In the surroundings, the originally extremely filthy black mud had completely disappeared. Not only the black mud, even the whole of the Holy Grail, and the increased value of the meat were all gone. The reason why the black mud disappeared, Noah could roughly guess. It was probably because it was completely absorbed by Noah, right? As for the reason why the whole of the Holy Grail disappeared, Noah could also guess. The hole was originally fixed by the magic stored in the Holy Grail. Now that the contaminated magic stored in the Holy Grail was all absorbed by Noah, there was naturally not enough magic to fix the whole of the Holy Grail. As for the increased value of the meat, which was the Holy Grail, it should have been taken care of by the girls, right? Was it already over? Chapter 8:15. Noah didn't expect that it would take him a whole night to create an infinite mana source. Not only that, but it also absorbed all the cursed black mud in the Great Holy Grail, causing the whole of the Holy Grail to be unable to be fixed, and it disappeared just like that. Thinking of this, Noah could not help but feel a little lucky. Fortunately, he didn't need to spend any more mana to create his own mana source. If the creation of the infinite mana source required more mana, then after exhausting all his mana and exhausting the mana in the Great Holy Grail, Noah would not have any other mana source to continue to create his own mana source. Almost, the creation of the mana source would have failed. In this case, how could Noah not feel lucky? Master, at this time, Ryder, who had been quietly waiting by the side, threw a person in his hand to Noah's feet. What should we do with this person? Hearing this, Noah lowered his head, looked at the person thrown to his feet by Ryder, and raised his eyebrows. That was Tong Shinji. His whole body was bulging with blue veins, and even his face was full of squirming blue veins. Tong Shinji was lying on the ground like a dead person. Although his eyes were open, his pupils were completely gone, leaving only the whites of his eyes. He was like a person in a vegetative state who had suffered extraordinary torture and had a nervous breakdown. In fact, Tong Shinji could not be called a person. After being transformed into the Little Holy Grail by the visceral inkstone, and being forcefully used to open the whole of the Holy Grail, the personality known as Shinji had long collapsed under that painful torture. What was left was only a living shell. In this regard, Noah did not have the slightest bit of pity. Because Tong Shinji was not worthy of Noah's pity at all. Noah was not a good person. He would save people, but only those who were pleasing to his eyes. And if it was someone who was not pleasing to his eyes, then no matter how bleak it was, the thing that deserved to die still deserved to die. Obviously, in Noah's heart, Tong Shinji belonged to this kind of person. For him to end up like this, it could be said that he deserved it. After Tong Shinji was petrified, the proliferating flesh was destroyed by us. Ryder said softly. But, that Tong Shinji was just a shell, the brain worm that contained his soul is not here, so it should not be dead yet. We dragged this man out of that mass of flesh. Originally, we wanted to find out the location of the brain worm from him. Rin Dosaka glanced at the motionless Shinji Tomoto on the ground and sighed. Now it seems that we have no way to get the whereabouts of the visceral stone of Jiantong from this person in a vegetative state whose mind has collapsed. At the side, Saber nodded. She looked at Tong Shinji, who was lying on the ground without moving. His body seemed to have worms crawling under his skin, and his veins were wriggling. She said expressionlessly. So, should we give him a quick death? Rin and Osaka didn't say anything. With Tong Shinji's current state, living in itself was equal to suffering. Then, it was better to give Tong Shinji a quick death. Thinking like this, Rin Enben did not object. He let Saber slightly raise her holy sword and walked towards Tong Shinji. But, at this time, Noah suddenly laughed. No, before that, let's dig out the guy hiding in the shell first. The guy hiding in the shell? The group of girls suddenly froze. Noah did not say anything, but looked at Tong Shinji's heart. He took off his coat, tore off a piece of cloth and wrapped it around his hand. In the next moment, Noah's hand that was wrapped in cloth suddenly pierced down. Poochie. With a tearing sound, Tong Shinji's heart was cleanly pierced. Tong Shinji's body only twitched a little, and then, he stopped moving. Gee! At the same time, in the heart of Tong Shinji that was pierced by Noah's hand, there was an ear-piercing sound, which shocked the group of girls. Only Noah seemed to have known what was going to happen. His expression did not change at all. He pulled out his hand with force, bringing out a burst of red blood. Ah! Ah! Then, an old scream rang out from Noah's palm as he pulled it out of his hand. Let me go! Let me go! Upon hearing this voice, Rin Enben, Saber, and Ryder immediately understood what was going on. When they saw Noah's blood-stained hand and the body that was letting out that shriek, they couldn't help but reveal a look of disgust. It was a bug. It was a bug that kept twisting its body and struggling in Noah's hand that was wrapped in a bloody cloth. The sound came from this disgusting bug. Although I've long guessed that your main body must be much more disgusting than the parasitic body, I didn't expect it to be so disgusting. Fortunately, I didn't touch it directly with my hands. Noah sneered. Don't you have any thoughts? Tong Shinji sink stone. Yes. The bug that was tightly held by Noah and could not break free no matter how hard it struggled was Tong Shinji sink stone. To be precise, it should be the brain worm that contained Tong Shinji's soul. Why? The insect struggled and screamed out loud. Why did you find me? It should be, why did you think of hiding in your grandson's body? Noah laughed mercilessly. You clearly know that your useless grandson is not a magician at all. Even his magic circuit has dried up. It is impossible for him to have magic in his body. You are still hiding in his body. You are really stupid. I immediately felt your magic in Shinji Mitsuki's body. Such an obvious magic aura, isn't it telling me that you are here? Just because of this reason? Tong Shinji's inkstone was shocked. Shinji is the little holy grail that I transformed. There is my imprint worm in his body, so it is normal to have my magic. How can you suspect that I am in Shinji's body because of this? Unfortunately, my feelings are so sharp. Noah curled his lips and smiled. Even if the imprint worm in your mouth can carry your magic, it can't carry your own aura. Your aura appeared in Tong Shinji's body. How can I not suspect? You actually hid in the Holy Grail that you created yourself. Has your desire for the Holy Grail reached this point? Noah's voice began to have evil intentions. This is also your failure. Tong Shinji Sink Stone, since it has fallen into my hands, the game should be over. No. Wait. Wait. The brain worm that contained the soul of Tong Shinji's inkstone began to struggle madly and shouted repeatedly. Kid. No, that's not right. Your Excellency Noah, please think about it carefully. There's no need for us to fight to this extent. If you think about it carefully, there's no direct conflict between us before this, nor is there any deep hatred. You don't have to kill me, right? You said that you are doing this for Sakura, but as far as I know, you have known Sakura for less than 10 days. The number of times you have met her is less than 10. Why do you want to make things difficult for me for such a little girl? Tong Shinji Sinkstone thought that he was smart. I know, there must be something on Sakura that caught your eye, right? Or do you want Sakura to be your plaything? That girl is really not bad looking. But as long as Sir Noah spares my life, I'll definitely find better toys for you than Xiao Ying's. In order to survive, Tong Shinji Sinkstone was willing to do anything. However, Tong Shinji's inkstone did not realize that his words had caused Noah, Rin Enbin, Saber, and Ryder's expressions to become colder and colder. Indeed, just as you said, I have known Sakura for less than 10 days. The number of times we have met is less than 10. In terms of feelings, we are still very shallow, but I find that girl very pleasing to the eye. Noah said sarcastically. For someone like you who treats human life as a plaything, it is completely incomprehensible. After saying that, Noah suddenly clenched his fist. Tong Shinji's inkstone did not even have time to scream before he was crushed into pieces. He turned into a pool of blood and died without a complete corpse. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.